Welcome back to that one random podcast. I'm Cypher.
And I'm Treble.
It's been a while, and I blame Treble because he's been going camping and doing all this other shit. So it's been a few weeks since we've done an episode.
It's good to be back.
But it's good to be back, and we're going to get into it today. We're going to start. It's a topic that we've been wanting to talk about for a while. It's one that I put together a while ago. We're going to talk about Ukraine.
Okay.
Yeah, the situation in Ukraine. A lot of things have taken place over there at the moment and stuff. Obviously, we all know what's going on. You know, Vladimir Putin has invaded Ukraine. Ukraine are obviously fighting back now, obviously, and have been for some time. It's been 2 years now, I think.
It's been a while,
It's been 2 years. It kicked off ago.
Just as soon as COVID ended, all of a sudden, Ukraine took the limelight.
You were hearing whispers about it before, weren't we? And then, obviously, you know, the big end of all it is that NATO wanted to put bases on Ukraine-Russian borders, and Russia was like, hell no, you ain't doing that. Yeah, but there was a lot of other things that came before it, which led to that point, and then eventually led to Russia wanting to invade Ukraine, which the Western media don't really touch on.
No.
And a lot of people who are bought into the Western media's agenda still will deny and say it's Putin propaganda. I'm not saying, listen, I'm not a Putin sympathizer or a Russian sympathizer. I'm against all war. So is Treble. We don't believe in all that nonsense there. You know, our lives are being lost. End of the day, the working class and the poor always pay the price for it, not the rich. The rich always sit in their nice bunkers and houses, and they're way away from the battlefield.
Exactly, yeah.
But this is probably us shining a little bit of light on the other side of the story, which you're not hearing in the mainstream media, which is all Ukraine, and it's all about Ukraine, and Ukraine are right and Russia are wrong. But this is probably going to expose a bit. Taking a lot of footage from a independent alternative media outlet called Truth in Media. I don't know if you've ever watched them.
No, not
really good, man.
Is it really?
Yeah, really good.
Truth in Media.
I also took a clip from Ukraine's on Fire.
Yeah, that.
Which I'm hoping YouTube's not going to pull us down for when I play that clip.
Yeah.
But it was just one clip I took from that. The rest came from the rest came from. But I encourage everyone to go over to Rumble and watch Ukraine on Fire. It'll open your eyes up to, I suppose, the history behind it all and how it started, like from 2014, and it's built to what it is now. But I thought where we could start is with a company that a lot of people don't know a lot about, BlackRock. Okay, so we're going to start with a clip of a lady, I believe she's a politician or something in Ukraine, or she's an activist of some kind, where she talks about how basically the Ukrainian government has sold the people out, and they're literally going to be now going to start selling their land to private investors in Ukraine. Right, so let's hear what she says. She's obviously speaking in Ukrainian. So I kind of used AI to kind of translate it. The subtitles and everything as well, but there's a voiceover too. So let's play that clip and we'll kick off from there, yeah?
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool.
And now let's figure out what they have voted for and what Ukraine was deprived of, in fact, for hundreds of years to come. So we're really witnessing this process. So what have they done? The first thing they have done is they passed the law that agricultural lands can be sold without any restrictions to foreign companies and individuals. What does that mean? This means Ukrainians will not be competitors in the auctions because they have no money. It means this, in fact, foreign corporations and citizens whose finances are not restricted will be able and will own Ukrainian agricultural lands.
Це означає, що, по суті, іноземні корпорації, іноземні громадяни, у яких фінанси не обмежені, будуть мати у власності українську сільськогосподарську землю.
Now, actually, that was a short clip, but already that's a bit of alarm bells are ringing.
It's not very smart now, is it?
Yeah, like there's already talks about how, and everyone seems to be saying a lot of this is that Ukraine is the most corrupt country in Europe. Yeah, there's a lot of corruption going on there. I don't know the ins and outs and the depths of it all, but this is one of the things that people are saying. Yeah, and we'll say that. We're not saying yes, it definitely is, right? But billions of pounds and dollars, or whatever you want to call it, are being pumped into there for this war. And apparently BlackRock is playing a massive part in buying up land as they are all over the world.
Yeah.
And for those who don't know who BlackRock is one of the largest, if not the largest asset management company in the world. And we've got to do a separate podcast on BlackRock, because I have got some information around BlackRock we want to get into. But essentially what this means is that you're taking the power away from the Ukrainian people. Yeah, everything's going to be corporate, and you as an individual, as a Ukrainian, won't be able to own anything.
Well, it's not very smart now, is it?
It's not smart. But
as she said, like the country's already in poverty, and the Ukrainian people don't really have that money. So who's going to buy all the agricultural land? Yeah,
true.
Go to foreign investors, which doesn't benefit them.
So I suppose the next video I want to kind of play is who is BlackRock? Yeah, okay. All right. And I believe the CEO is Larry Fink. But we'll find out who Larry Fink is as well. All right. So I'm going to play this next clip.
Maybe you're learning of BlackRock for the very first time, and if so, then a little backdrop would go a long way. BlackRock's CEO. Who is Larry Fink? Larry Fink, born Lawrence Douglas Fink, is the chairman and chief executive officer of BlackRock, the world's largest asset management firm. He co-founded BlackRock in 1988 with 7 partners, and under his leadership, the firm has grown into a global powerhouse in investment and technology solutions. BlackRock manages more money than any other investment company in the world, making Fink one of the most influential figures in finance. Before founding BlackRock, Fink was a member of the management committee and a managing director at the First Boston Corporation. He holds an MBA from the University of California at Los Angeles, earned in 1976, and a BA from UCLA, earned in 1974. Fink is also a member of the Board of Trustees of New York University and the World Economic Forum. He serves on the boards of the Museum of Modern Art, the Council on Foreign Relations, and the International Rescue Committee. Additionally, he is on the advisory board of the Tsinghua University School of Economics and Management in Beijing and the executive committee of the Partnership for New York City. Well, for Larry Fink, we can say he's a decorated businessman. To say the very least, he's got such high echelons that go a long way with his leadership roles and businesses.
Cool, so that's Larry Fink and the BlackRock CEO, all right? But what also I'm going to play you a clip of now is Zelensky meeting a member of the BlackRock's team, or executives or whatever it is. But there were other investors there too as well. But it's starting to show, it will show you the intent behind a lot of things that are happening in Ukraine as well. And I don't know whether this is a good thing or a bad thing for the Ukrainian people. We could chop it up later on, but I'm just going to play that footage.
We're so happy. God bless you. Thank you so much.
Great to see you.
Wow, this is unbelievable. So that should tell you everything right there. So BlackRock's making money off of the war in Ukraine. They also got the contract to rebuild Ukraine. So do you think that might be a conflict of interest? Like the more destroyed Ukraine gets, the more money BlackRock's going to make? Wow. So I think the government should call in the Sherman antitrust laws, seize BlackRock and all of their assets. Yeah, that's what I think. BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard should do that with all 3 of these companies because they're too big to fail. Let me know what you think in the comments.
Cool, so the next clip I'm going to play you is apparently a former CIA agent, right? You might recognize him. He's popping around on social media a lot lately, and a lot of people are doing interviews with him, podcasters, big podcasters as well. I think he was on Joe Rogan's recently as well. And it's like a minute clip where he talks about how corrupt Ukraine is. Yeah?
Okay.
Ukraine is corrupt, heavily corrupt. The struggles that happen in that conflict zone because of the current corruption. Materials disappear, money disappears, weapons disappear, they get resold on the black market. It's a mess, right? So if you only look at it in terms of Ukraine and Russia, we end up missing the bigger picture. Because the real conflict here is a conflict between which direction the United States wants to drive the world as a potential superpower. Right? If we go down, the Biden administration and the media all try to tell us that we have to protect Ukraine, that the United States' protection of Ukraine serves this larger purpose in protecting democracy and secures the long-term future of pro-democratic countries. That's all a party line. That's baloney. What the real reason...
And I promise I've got one more clip, yeah? Okay, and this was taken from Truth in Media, and they're really, I encourage everyone to go follow Truth in Media.
Are they on YouTube or are they?
They're on, they've got their own website.
Okay.
Yeah, so like I haven't bothered looking for them on YouTube because you can imagine YouTube will probably put them down left, right and centre.
I hear that.
Jimmy Dore uses a lot of their clips when he's doing his episodes on YouTube, but they have their own website. And it's alternative media. He used to be part of the guy who heads off, who actually does all the presenting, the host, etc. But it's obviously his company as well. He, I think it used to be a media, left mainstream media because he wanted to be a real journalist, I guess. So I thought, all right, start my own one. So but I'm going to play this clip as well, and then we can chop it up.
Cool.
We'll give our thoughts, yeah?
Just Russia invading Ukraine.
Who's really running Ukraine? Could it be the global financial elites who are the biggest directors of this drama? They appear to be the ones who have been telling Zelensky what to do, as well as most other Ukrainian presidents since the dissolution of the Soviet Union.
We'll take the big business of international lending as an example. Since the war began, the IMF agreed to lend over $15 billion to Ukraine, the first time they ever issued a loan to a country at war. And it doesn't stop there. The financial behemoth has put together a plan to facilitate a projected $64 billion in loans over the next few years.
As the world's largest investment company, which manages over $8 trillion in assets, BlackRock has had a hand in virtually everything, including a 15% share in Fox News. Now, here's something you probably didn't know. President Zelensky recently inked a deal with BlackRock, which will effectively hand post-war Ukraine's economy over to the financial behemoth.
Some of the groups that are going into Ukraine and they're cutting deals to take advantage of the Ukrainian national capital.
BlackRock will be running the Ukraine Development Fund, which aims to pump as much as $750 billion into Ukraine after the war.
The long list of individuals who use their political positions to get rich off of Ukraine is reportedly headlined by none other than President Joe Biden and his son, Hunter Biden. The Congressional Oversight Committee documents that despite having no relevant experience, Hunter Biden was paid up to $1 million a year to serve on Burisma's board from 2014 to 2019.
And basically, Hunter Biden was offered to make $60,000, $80,000 a month just to be on the board of directors. In Ukraine, the average salary before the war was $500, $1,000 a month. And a teacher would get $200 a month. And this guy comes in, drug addict, just because he's the son of the Vice President of the United States, he brings in the cash and he brings in the connections.
Ukraine's Prosecutor General, Viktor Shokin, was investigating corruption within Burisma until then Vice President Joe Biden stepped in.
They were walking out to press conference and said, no, I said, we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. Got fired.
Now, President Biden has since claimed that he got Shokin fired because he wasn't doing enough to combat corruption. Entries on Wikipedia, and you know how unreliable that site is, claims that Biden's firing of Shokin to protect himself and his son Hunter, it's just a conspiracy theory. This line is supported by mainstream news outlets like CNN and USA Today.
But evidence presented in a U.S. Senate committee investigation claims that Shokin's dismissal was related to the Biden family's corruption schemes. The committee alleges that Shokin was fighting corruption in Ukraine and his scrutiny endangered Burisma.
Shokin himself recently made public declarations stating that Biden had him ousted from office because he was hot on his trail.
Видимо, господину Байдену доложили, что мы подходим к тому моменту, что начался допросы его сына и остальных лиц, Арчера, ну и других лиц, которые причастны к этой ситуации по делу Бурисма. И они понимали, прекрасно понимали, что это может закончиться довольно для них плачевно.
Accusations of the Biden's shady dealings are not just limited to payouts and favors, though. There are also questions of the Biden family's connections to biolabs in Ukraine. When he was a Burisma executive and his father was vice president, Hunter Biden's company, Rosemont Seneca, invested $500,000 into a San Francisco-based pathogen research company called Metabiota. I was actually one of the first reporters in the country to tell this story back in 2021. Hunter Biden introduced Metabiota to Burisma officials to negotiate the establishment of biolabs in Ukraine. During this time, Metabiota also received $24 million in funding from the Department of Defense, which included money for Ukrainian research projects. Although the U.S. government and its cheerleaders in the media screamed that the existence of U.S. biolabs in Ukraine were a Russian fabrication and conspiracy theories, the Pentagon and other U.S. government officials later admitted to the fact that 46 peaceful Ukrainian laboratories exist in the country.
There are indisputably biolabs in Ukraine that were financed by the United States.
46 peaceful Ukrainian laboratories exist in the country.
There are indisputably biolabs in Ukraine that were financed by the United States. In fact, Victoria Nuland herself, Victoria Nuland being the Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs at the State Department, she revealed in sworn Senate testimony when she was answering a question from Marco Rubio.
Ukraine has biological research facilities, which in fact we are now quite concerned Russian troops, Russian forces may be seeking to gain control of.
Now, if you're creating like a cure for cancer at some biolab, you know, you're not worried that if some opposing army captures it, it's going to inflict this cure for cancer on your troops, now are you? You only care if what you're dealing with is extremely dangerous and deliberately designed as a weapon.
This cast of war hawks, neocons, and neoliberals within the Biden administration, though, doesn't stop with Victoria Nuland. There's also Biden's Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, and his Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin. Being of Ukrainian descent, Blinken has taken a great interest in Ukraine and its conflict with Russia, and has crafted the Obama and Biden administration's policies towards these countries. But Blinken has some obvious conflicts of interest. He co-founded West Exec Advisors, a private firm with ties to the defense industry. Blinken was also a partner in West Exec's sister company, Pine Island Capital Partners, which invests in the U.S. defense industry. Blinken says that he left the company before taking the role of Biden's Secretary of State. Blinken's partner at Pine Island Capital, though, was Lloyd Austin, Joe Biden's Secretary of Defense. Austin was also a board member of the military contractor Raytheon Technologies, where it's estimated that he held anywhere from $800,000 to $1.75 million in investments.
One thing that I did recognize spending all those years with my colleagues, particularly on Capitol Hill, is that they live in an absolute bubble. We're one step away from winning in Afghanistan, winning in Iraq, winning in etc. And if you look at the witness list, there was no one there, no one provided to give the alternative perspective. And this is true under Republicans and under Democrats. They simply don't listen to anyone with any different view. And when they fail, they're promoted.
Aside from international bankers and U.S. military contractors, who else stands to gain from Ukraine? Well, there are, of course, the oligarchs. As we saw in the last episode, Zelensky was practically created by Igor Kolomoisky, one of Ukraine's richest men and an accused gangster/banker.
He backed him for the presidency. Keep in mind that when Zelensky ran for the presidency of Ukraine, he could speak no Ukrainian. He only spoke Russian because that's the only language that he'd ever been exposed to. So he was picked to do this.
But Zelensky's oligarch connections don't stop with Kolomoisky. There's also the case of Viktor Pinchuk, perhaps the richest person in Ukraine. Zelensky regularly speaks at Pinchuk's Yes Forum, and Pinchuk has been one of Zelensky's most important supporters. Pinchuk was a mere millionaire when he married Ukrainian President Leonid Kuchma's daughter in 1997. This arrangement, coupled with Kuchma's vast privatization drive, quickly turned the millionaire into a billionaire and one of the country's most powerful people. He's known for rubbing shoulders with global elites, and he keeps them happy. Pinchuk donated a whopping $8.6 million to the Clinton Foundation during the time that Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State. He also donated 320,000 pounds to Tony Blair's Faith Foundation, and he's a major donor for NATO's think tank, the Atlantic Council, where he also sits on its International Advisory Board. One could argue that it's figures like Pinchuk, in collaboration with the U.S. and NATO, that started all of this back in 2014.
Решали те олигархи, которые наняли
What so many Americans just don't know is that the Ukraine war didn't start with Russia's invasion in February of 2022, but 8 years before, with a coup staged with the diplomatic and economic support of the United States government. Ukraine's democratically elected president, Viktor Yanukovych, was a thorn in the U.S.'s side because of his refusal to take money from the IMF and instead lean toward Russia for financial stability.
But think about the audacity of a high-ranking U.S. State Department official and many U.S. senators back in 2014 being involved in the overthrow of an elected government in Ukraine and calling it a democratic revolution. I mean, if the shoe were on the other foot and you had Russian or Chinese senior ranking political military officers coming to the United States and openly campaigning for a candidate or other, it would shock the U.S. to its core.
And there's little evidence to suggest that these foreign interests, the United States included, want what's best for ordinary Ukrainians.
It is a monumental strategic objective that is just now beginning to emerge from the fog. Now, I've seen it and I've talked about it now for the last couple of years. This idea that the ultimate goal was the dismantlement of Russia and using global oligarchs, I call them the boys from Davos, they are beginning to think, you know what, if we could somehow dismantle Russia with their phenomenal natural resources, why, my gosh, instead of being a multi-billionaire, I'll be a trillionaire.
You know, it's the I'll botch the quote from Sun Tzu, but you set the world ablaze to rule over the ashes. It seems that's what NATO's doing.
Well, sadly, that is true of neocon and neoliberal policies in the Middle East that have destroyed countries in Iraq and Syria, in Libya and Yemen. Now they're doing it in Ukraine. And if those who are running Ukraine or are the most powerful in that country have no regard for whether they leave the nation and its people in ashes, what does that mean for Ukrainians who will become collateral damage? In our next episode, we're going to take a look at who's really responsible for one of the highest stakes terror attacks since 9/11 in what might be one of the most bungled acts of war in history. And be sure to watch all of our episodes at truthinmedia.com and on X at @truth_in_media. We'll be back next week as we continue to leave Zelensky unmasked.
Cool. I just want to shout out Truth in Media again. Go check them out. Definitely a website you should be bookmarking on your browsers. And look, they give a lot of content.
I was going to say, we're deep on that.
Yeah. That's just the first clip.
Yeah.
Mate. There's a lot of clips. But you know what? I've seen a lot of people who are pointing out saying that Ukraine is corrupt, and you see it in comment sections where people start debating each other. I don't get involved in comment sections because, you know, it's like, who's the bigger fool, right? You know, the fool or the one trying to educate the fool. And I'm like, I'm trying to educate you, but all right, I'm not going to waste my time. I don't do that anymore.
Brick wall, innit?
Yeah, you are bashing your head against a brick wall. But at the same time, we saw quite a bit of evidence there. The opposite to what Western media is telling us. Or not telling us about what's going on in Ukraine. Now, from a financial point of view, I've got loads more clips we're going to go through as well. Don't get me wrong, it's going to be a long session, but a worthwhile one where it's clearly pointing out that investors are now already taking control of Ukraine. Essentially, you destroy the country, you level it basically, and then you like say, well, come in and buy it up, and they come in and buy it up. But what you don't realize is that you got the World Bank, IMF, all that stuff, who are now giving loans to Ukraine. When they do that, a lot of people don't understand that. They control your economy. They control your country. They control your country's policy. If they turn around and say to Zelensky, change that law, he has to change it.
Done, innit?
Or they cut his funding. Or we don't like your take on this. You need to say this. Okay. The Ukrainian people won't like this though. Don't care. That's what we want. Or we want you to go to war with that country over there. You're going to kick it off. Okay. You understand? You are under complete control of these oligarchs and these big, massive corporations, right? And it told you as well, BlackRock's the biggest asset management company in the world. And if they're giving you money, and they're not giving it all in one go, they give it to you in bits, The minute you start saying, no, I'm not doing that, fine. We'll take this back. Oh, interest rates have gone up, by the way. You need to pay this much now. We want it by the end of the month. That's why we're taking you to court.
We won't survive, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You lose your power. So he's not in charge. Clearly, already we're seeing that.
Yeah.
He's a puppet. But people don't want to believe that. They want to put him up as like this Winston Churchill type hero. And
so I'm so far out of the mainstream media. I can't even...
But it's true.
People actually trying to say that he's like Winston Churchill.
Yeah, they're trying to make it like Winston Churchill. They're trying to make it out like he's the Winston Churchill of this war and this battle. They literally are holding him up
He's
like
the savior.
He's the savior of Ukraine.
Wow.
All right. There's more to go through. Don't get me wrong. But what's your thoughts on what you saw?
I mean, if anything, if I have to sum it up, it's some shady shit.
Yeah.
There's some shady shit going on. Like, you don't need to be a genius to see it. Like, when they connect all the dots and all the people involved, as you said, like during it, they probably couldn't hear us, but there's a lot of Americans involved in this.
Yeah.
And, you know, Hunter Biden and Joe Biden and Tony Blair's getting thrown in it.
The Clinton Foundation was in there.
Yeah, some shady World Economic Forum. As you said,
Davos. As soon as you see them, you're like,
the Davos boys. What is going on, guys? Greta Thunberg's gonna pop up into this eventually.
She does somewhere. She's in the clip somewhere. She meets Zelensky. I think I've got a clip with
Lord.
Like, she's not saying anything. She's just meeting Zelensky. She's just meeting Zelensky.
Man.
But like she will pop up in it somewhere.
Shit.
But it's just crazy that people don't understand that they're buying up your country. Yeah. And these rich, even the Klitschko brothers are in on this. Yeah, a lot of people are holding like Sky. I haven't watched it, but Sky have done a documentary of Klitschko.
Yeah,
war, like how the part they're playing in the Ukrainian war.
He's the mayor, isn't he?
And then the older one, Vitaly Klitschko.
Yeah,
is. But there's clips of him and how he kind of instigated a lot of the problems in Ukraine as well. Yeah, he's as corrupt as the rest of them. Yeah, and people are holding these two up as war heroes. Like he said, he was going to fight on the front line. And
I saw that.
And there were stories of him catching. I go, that man ain't fighting on the front line. Are you mad?
Put the boots on.
Are you stupid? Just because he's in a picture or in a video at the front line does not mean he's fighting. Yeah, I guarantee you, he's walking away afterwards in one piece. So,
I mean, look, as we said,
they said the same about Alexander Usyk and Lomachenko, but they never fought. They were just defending their homes and taking pictures with guns.
It's a way of flagging it.
Yeah.
But as you mentioned earlier, end of the day, war is never good, and it's the innocent that suffer in all of this. And it's the children.
It's the poor and working class to pay the price.
Yeah, and that's why we have to speak up about it, because there's this misconception that it's one side versus another, when really both sides are losing. The real people are losing.
Yeah.
The working class, the poor people, the actual citizens of the countries, the innocent, are the ones that suffer. And until people can start recognizing it, will we actually...
Ukrainian citizens have more in common with Russian citizens, right, than they will ever understand.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's like the same with what's going on in the UK. You got the Muslims on one side, and you got the white Brits on one side, majority white Brits on one side.
Yeah.
But if they sat down and had a cup of tea, they'll find out they've got a lot in common with each other. In terms of their day-to-day life, they've got a lot more in common with each other.
More than the oligarchs and the billionaires
exactly, who are causing the problem.
Are funding everything.
Do you know what I mean? But you're now, you're being told to choose a side.
Yeah.
And if you're not choosing the side of Ukraine, you're a Russian sympathizer, you're a propagandist, you're this. Okay, but there's two sides to every story. You can't ignore the other side. Oh, but that's propaganda. But then you could easily say, well, what the West is saying is propaganda. And we've seen evidence of propaganda from the West.
Yeah.
Remember weapons of mass destruction? WMDs?
Yeah.
Where were they?
I mean, Tony Blair gets a shout out. And
you never found them, right? Where were the links to Al-Qaeda? They were never there. But yet we're pumping billions of gallons of oil. And even, remember Craig Harrison?
Yeah.
When we did our mental health episode, he even said it, that when he got asked, are these wars worth it? He goes, no. He goes, because when our boots hit the ground and we got off the plane, you look to the left or the right, and they were already pumping the oil out in Iraq.
Literally.
Because that's what it was about. So you can't say that the West don't push propaganda, because there's been evidence of plenty of propaganda from the West. So I'm not saying Russians don't push propaganda. Every government does. But to say it's just one side,
And as you said, like every country pushes propaganda, and I also think every country has its own form of corruption to some level. And
of course.
To deny that there is corruption taking place, especially in poor countries like Ukraine.
In Russia, right, they have all these oligarchs who run everything.
Yeah.
How does that happen? Because Putin allows it to. These are guys who work, who are politically in cahoots with him. So he's not exactly innocent. I'm not saying he's incorruptible. Absolutely not. But to turn around and say it's just one side, no, that's
clearly not
bullshit,
true.
Isn't it? You're not telling the people the truth.
Yeah.
Where's the real journalism? Right? And obviously, that's why I like watching Truth in Media, because you're getting the other side of that.
You talked about the biolabs.
Yeah.
I mean, that was...
At the beginning, it was propaganda. It was conspiracy theory. Now you're admitting to it. But the point I like is what Gonzalo Lera said there, the US journalist, and I'm not want to talk about him too much here because we're going to get onto him a little bit. But he was making the point as well. If you're doing research in those biolabs, friendly, peaceful biolabs, and you're doing research into coming up with a cure for cancer, why are you worried about it's going to fall in the hands of the Russians?
Yeah.
So the Russians got the cure for cancer. Oh, wow. Has someone got it? Yeah, give it to everyone, please.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, that, you're only going to be worried if you're doing something which is weaponry, weaponized, gain of function research, maybe perhaps as well, things that are going to help the other side.
And as you said, like, I don't know if you touched on it, how all of the bases were along the border. And that's an act of aggression, is it not?
Put it this way, what I say to everyone says, you always hear that argument, right? That why can't Ukraine, it's their land, if they want to put NATO bases on their side of the border, that's up to them. Okay, cool. So let's say Russia and France were best mates, and Russia turned around and said, we want to put bases on your coastal line, and we want to point the guns towards the UK. Would the UK put up with that?
Not a chance.
Would you, as a UK citizen, put up with that? No. All right, let's use another example. Mexico. Let's say Russia and Mexico were close buddies. Or Russia and China and Mexico were close buddies. And Russia and China said, we want to put bases along your border, and we want the guns facing US. Would the US put up with it? No, they would invade Mexico and take them out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And let's not forget, many, many, many decades ago, the Cuban Missile Crisis, where old Soviet Union wanted to put nuclear weapons in Cuba. Only a few miles off the coast of America. And there was uproar about that. It never happened, of course, but...
Yeah, as you said, but imagine on the border.
So actually, to turn around and make that argument is redundant, because end of the day, any nation that isn't comfortable with that is going to, or having army bases along their border, or even if it's on the other side of the border, they're going to say no.
Yeah.
And NATO for years now have been closing in on Russia.
That's why.
All right. We'll get into a bit more into about Russia as well. Because remember, Russia's a country of a lot of resource.
A lot. It's huge.
Huge amount of resource, which gives them a lot of power and control.
A lot of independence as well.
Yeah,
which
exactly.
I think,
right? So to make that argument is, in my opinion, it's a poor argument.
Yeah. I mean, I heard it from
reverse it around the other way. We wouldn't put up with it. So why are we? I mean, why is Russia going to put up with it?
Yeah. Why?
Because it's us, and we're allowed to do what we want.
No, straight up.
So I don't agree with it all, but and then it's interesting. BlackRock, Larry Finkel, asset management company, biggest one, and they're buying in. You saw JP Morgan were there.
Yeah.
You know, these are some of the biggest companies. These are those rich elite elites that we're talking about that control politicians. Yeah, and you should be worried. If I was Ukrainian, I'd be worried to a degree, because it means that certain things are going to change in your country. That you're not, any freedoms that you did have once before are probably going to start disappearing. But anyway, let's move on. Yeah, so let's move on to the next. I'm going to put a little pick up, and then we'll talk about this.
Cool.
This bit. Yeah. So we're going to put a picture up, and then we'll talk about this idiot. Yeah. All right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So here's our illustrious leader, obviously Keir Starmer, Prime Minister, clown.
Yeah.
Right.
That's been nice.
Who's that's just putting it nicely, yeah. Who has decided we will give $3 billion a year of our taxpayers' money.
Is this actually
to Ukraine till the job is done?
Lord, why?
Right.
So we're involved now fully.
Oh yeah, of course. And don't forget as well at the same time, the UK and this was months ago they did this, the UK and the US gave Ukraine permission to use UK and US weaponry against Russia. But not only that, they've now invaded Russia and started to use it in Russia. Right? So they did a drone attack on Moscow. And Putin's like,
It's not very friendly, is it?
I told you boys not to go there, and now you're going there, right? And he's tolerant as well. I have to admit, he's quite tolerant. You know what scares me at Putin? He's, you know, one of those guys, you go in a room, right? And you sit down with him and he doesn't really say much. And he just looks at you and he's quiet. And you think like, what is this guy thinking right now? Yeah, he's that guy.
Yeah, he's that guy.
And then suddenly he does something and you're like, oh shit.
He's about that.
He's about that life. Do you get it?
Yeah. No,
he gives that sense of a strong...
Yeah.
It's like, to be fair, like Trump as well, right? Like remember we revealed that we showed the clip of the Taliban leader, what he did to the Taliban leader. Like basically, here's a picture of your home, an aerial picture. Why are you showing me this? Well, you harm the hair on the head of any US citizen or soldier in Afghanistan, I'm going to take you out. Yeah, but do you mean then you're like, oh shit, yeah.
You won't see Starmer or Biden say Kamala now, isn't it? Wow.
You know, I don't get that feeling from Kears anyway. Yeah, for me, he's not a very strong leader. But anyway, look, end of the day, very much involved now. The UK, the US is involved as well. What I'm going to do now is
more so with Keir Starmer than we were with Rishi. Or is it just a
I think it's more with Kears because Kears is very pro Davos.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say next. Well. They're both.
But he's very but Rishi didn't really go to Davos.
No, he did not.
Kears, even when Kears wasn't a prime minister, he was the opposition leader only.
I mean, he puts it before.
He went to Davos. He only said it on Sky News. Whatever he puts when he got asked that question, Davos, and didn't say World Economic Forum. They said Davos
or Parliament
or Parliament or UK. Or UK goes, well, Davos, isn't it? Because why? Because Parliament's so restricted.
Yeah, what the fuck?
And I was like,
oh no.
I was like, oh, okay, yeah.
Shows where his intentions
these are things that you and I and many other people have been talking about, and we were called conspiracy theorists for, and now the truth's coming out.
Truth's not coming out enough though.
Yeah, but people are still sticking their head in the sand.
People don't know what Davos is.
Yeah, they haven't got a clue. But they're like, take some time out, man. You got time for Netflix. You think like take an hour in your day, just 30 minutes.
People don't want to do some research. They don't want to know.
I don't spend all my days doing it. Like, you think I spend all day long researching this shit? No, I will spend, and it takes. You've got it on your phone.
This is what I was going to say earlier. Like the power of the internet has actually been such a stuff like Truth in Media.
That's the good thing about it.
The internet has all the information you could possibly want. You just have to be clever in how you ask it.
Yeah.
But if you obviously
even
just turn on to the
if you put
mainstream,
the question right to ChatGPT, it will lead you in the right direction.
It will lead you in the right directions. And yeah, the internet it's kind of like a double-edged sword, right? Where you get both sides. But you have to look at both sides.
But cool, I'm going to play now a clip of Andrew Bridgen, British MP. I'm just going to play the clip and then you can give your thoughts on it afterwards, yeah?
Yeah.
We are actually at war with Russia now.
We've got.
They haven't told you. They haven't told you.
So say that again.
We're actually at war with Russia now. I met with Andrei Kelin, the Russian ambassador in London, a couple of months ago, and he said that we know that your people are firing those Storm Shadow missiles at us out of Ukraine because you couldn't train the Ukrainians to do it. We know you're doing it, and I mean everybody knows that there are lots of US, UK, French. The French are in there.
I thought it was the Brits were down on the ground and special advisors.
Yeah.
Training sessions and teaching them and showing them.
Isn't that how?
But they were apparently. That's how we started with the Vietnam War.
Vietnam War, yeah.
Dude, what the frack are we doing poking the bear? That's really stupid.
They're determined to get us into a war with Russia, and thank God we've got someone in Putin who at least has got some brains.
Now you sound like a Putin lover.
Well, I'm not. I'm not convinced any of them are any good. But at the end of the day, if you look at the facts, since '91. We've moved NATO 1,000 miles nearer to Moscow. They haven't moved nearer to us.
No, they haven't.
And if you think about what we were trying to do, the EU wanted to bring in Ukraine for whatever reason, and NATO wanted it, and they'd have put missiles on the border of Russia. Well, I mean, what did America do when the old Soviet Union tried to put missiles in Cuba 90 miles off the Florida coast?
Yeah, exactly.
They weren't having it, were they?
No.
And if you look back, the Russians have told us for long enough Ukraine's got to remain neutral. You know, we're not going to let it get them. They've told us this for a very long time.
So hold on a sec. You said Rishi wants out, and then
Rishi doesn't want to be Rishi's told the generals he doesn't want to be a wartime prime minister.
Really? So who's calling the shots? Is it the generals, or the prime minister, or someone else? Because.
So that was an interesting clip.
Yeah, very.
Innit? What do you think?
I think that's quite deep. Like, one, obviously, the UK media is not saying that we are actively involved.
Yeah.
You know, fighting over there. Obviously, a British MP saying that we are. But I thought it was always interesting when he says that Rishi didn't want to be a wartime MP, and so the only logical.
But this is. But do you know what I found out recently? Yeah. Okay. You know, it's not actually the leaders of our country that decide whether we go to war or not, right? And we've already touched on it. Yeah. We already touched on it at the beginning. I'm talking about within the political spectrum, right? So the CIA, for example, in America, the CIA tell the president if they're going to war or not.
Yeah.
And they say, that country, now, order it. He actually doesn't have a say.
No.
He does what they tell him to do, right? Because the balances of checks and balances, I'm guessing, work out that way, right? But here in the UK, it wouldn't be any different.
No.
Right, the generals will be saying, we're going to war. All right? Now, what people need to understand is a lot of these top generals in these countries will have links and investments placed in arms companies. When they go to war, they get rich on the back of it.
Military industrial complex.
Exactly. Yeah. Right, let's look at the Bush family, for example, right? So before 9/11 happened, their arms company, I can't remember what it was called back then, but remember there was that documentary Fahrenheit 9/11?
Yeah.
By Michael Moore. I don't like everything Michael Moore does, don't get me wrong, but that was an interesting documentary. And he pointed out how Bush's company the Bush family's arms company was in peril. It was in the ship, basically. 9/11 happened. We went to the war, and where did all those contracts go to? The Bush family's company.
War sells,
and they were the most profitable company in that year, that first year. What does that tell you?
Yeah.
So, like, you know, all of you guys out there who got these ideologies of yours, and you're like, yeah, Ukraine, yeah, Russia, yeah, this, and you're picking a side, you do realize that, you know what, they're playing you.
Yeah.
They're playing you and using you to push it. Yeah, you are the pawns. And it's time you woke up. But he's clearly saying as well, like, we're already at war with them. Yeah, we know British soldiers and US soldiers and French soldiers are already here and they're already fighting. We're aware of it. But yet you're claiming to everyone else, no, we're not getting involved like that.
Just fund it.
Yeah, we're just funding it. We're just supporting them.
We're just training them.
We're just training them.
Oh, no.
Whatever. There was a clip as well, though, like, I can't remember where it was, right? But then it wasn't Ukraine. Was it Moldova? It was another, I can't remember which country. And I remember there was a US troop. There were US troops in there walking through, like, down the street, like, in the country or whatever. And this guy goes, what are you doing here? Speaking in bit of broken English, but they're asking him, like, what are you doing? Oh, we're here to help you. We don't need your help. Get out of our country. Because they knew what that meant was that if we got US troops here, the fuck? The war's going to come on our doorstep.
Yeah. In it.
Yeah, straight in it. My family's at risk now.
Yeah, for sure.
So it was interesting.
US brings collateral damage, doesn't it?
Yeah, look, but it's interesting how we keep saying we're not involved, we're just supporting and blah, blah, blah. Well, we're very much involved and we're deep shit into it.
And obviously now we've got Starmer, you know, he's obviously pro whatever agenda that
he's placed $3 billion a year.
Yeah, exactly. So he's gonna want to get involved even harder for whatever, you know, side that he believes is right.
Well, or should we say his real bosses or his masters, if you want to put it, are telling him to, or what they're telling him to do. His job is just to make it happen.
Make it happen, yeah. Like you said, you know, he's actually one of the puppets involved with all these guys. So, shit, it's going to escalate soon.
Cool. Let's talk a little bit about Ukrainian elections, which were recently cancelled.
Okay.
For the Ukrainians to block. So basically, what people were saying is that, well, it makes sense to cancel the elections in Ukraine because they're at war at the moment. So you need like consistency with the leadership or whatever, right? But I'm going to show you some pics, and this was on the recent Euros, and this was from Ukrainian fans. But I'm just going to put the pic up first. So here's a pic. The Ukrainian people are giving signals to the world that they need help to get rid of Zelensky. At a football match with Slovakia yesterday, the Ukrainians took out a banner that reads, "Give us back our elections." As you already know, Zelensky cancelled the elections and now Ukraine is in a dictatorship. The banner was removed by a Ukrainian delegation at halftime, but the world got the message. Ukrainians who are being hunted like animals on the streets of Ukraine to die in NATO's proxy war are looking for outside help.
I mean, that's crazy that
I haven't got clips of it, but I have seen clips of it where they're just taking men from the street and saying, "You're going to war."
Nah,
Yeah, bro.
Just like that.
Yeah, Ukrainians.
Oh,
I've seen clips of it.
No,
they're just whipping them up off the street, literally, and chucking them back in the vehicle, and off they go.
Off they go.
Yeah.
Put on the boots and just
anyone
go
from
straight
age.
out.
I think it's like age 18 to 60.
Shit. But that's quite crazy that they stopped the election. Like, let the people vote. If Zelensky's really doing the job that they,
if you're doing such a great job, then
they'll vote for you.
Yeah, they'll vote for you in. Keep you in.
But clearly, he doesn't want that.
But given the history of their elections, there's corruption in that as well. It's
corruption.
Where and we're going to go into it a little bit as well. Where there've been previous elections. This stems from 2014 or whatever. Yeah, where the problems really started beginning when a democratically elected leader was put in place, and the US, in a sense, helped overthrow, and essentially it was a coup.
Oh.
So, how can you trust it anyway? So they did have an election. They'll probably rig it to say that Zelensky won anyway. But the point is that there's some Ukrainians. There's some Ukrainians are like, nah, man, we want him out.
Yeah.
It's not all 100% we're behind him, kind of thing. So, but the picture says a lot as well.
Yeah.
But cool. So we're going to play this US Senator clip as well. What's her name again?
Tulsi Gabbard.
That's the one, yeah. So we're going to play her clip as well. And you know a bit more about her than I do, I'm guessing.
She's a politician, isn't she? But her background was...
She was Democrat. And now she's Republican, right?
I think she's independent, but more...
On the Republican side.
On the Republican side, because obviously, if you look at the two spectrums of it now, the left have just gone absolute crazy. You know, when it's supposed to be about freedom and democracy, Democrat democracy, right? But it's just not about that anymore. It's all agenda driven and a lot of extreme policies that she doesn't agree with anymore. And actually, Republican and their stance on freedom and liberty makes a lot more sense. So yeah, she's one of the forefront politicians of it now. Yeah.
Cool. All right, let's play the clip.
Here is something that the political establishment and propaganda media don't want you to know. Ukraine's President Zelensky has just banned yet another political opposition party, one that questioned his legitimacy as president, and used Ukraine's Department of Justice to mandate the seizure of this party's members' assets. Now, this is just the latest of Zelensky's actions to do this sort of thing. He began banning major political opposition parties in 2022, when he also started banning TV channels that were associated with his political opponents. And he took over total control of Ukraine's largest television networks, now controlled by their government. Now, Zelensky's presidential term ended on May 20th. He canceled elections in the name of martial law, suspending Ukraine's constitution so that he could stay in power. Now, defenders of Zelensky will say, hey, Ukraine is in the middle of a war. They can't have elections. Just stop for a moment and think, if we accept that excuse or criteria for suspending the Constitution and canceling elections, then we should presume that leaders in our own country and our own establishment media will also use this same excuse and rationale when they suspend our Constitution and our elections, since we too are at war with Russia and China. Now, if you think this sounds crazy, look at what's already going on. They've already started conditioning us to accept a dictatorship by rationalizing their own use of our Department of Justice to target President Trump and other political enemies in their efforts to stay in power.
So what was interesting, or what hit me there when she was talking, was very much what she was saying, which was that, think about it, we've got an election coming up in America in end of November.
Yeah.
Now, if US get involved in a full-blown war, even in the Middle East, which they literally are saying that they are going to send troops out there to help Israel, will the current party in charge, which is the Democrats, turn around and say, no, cancel the elections, we're at war. Just like we did in Ukraine. Ukraine can't have elections, we can't have elections, do you understand?
That's definitely something that they would.
And imagine if that war went on goes on beyond 5 years. Keir Starmer's just taken over. He could say, no, cancelling the election, sorry. Well, no, I'm staying in power. We've got a war going on. We can't change leadership.
I mean, they did it during the London mayor election as well during COVID. We've got a pandemic going on, cancelled the elections for another year. And while that was happening, Sadiq Khan obviously stayed as mayor and therefore was allowed to put in all his policies, all that, low traffic neighborhoods and
Exactly.
And that all happened as a result of an election not happening and allowing this leader to stay in power for another, in our case, was just another year. Yeah. Obviously, he got the vote again, but within that year. So yeah, if the war goes on for longer and they use that excuse, then what sort of changes can we see and how quick can they make those?
And that's the point she's making.
Shit.
She's saying that if we're accepting that in Ukraine, we're going to have to accept that here.
They love it though.
The countries, they would love it.
They'd love it, wouldn't they?
Of course they would. But if Republicans were in power right now, and
they'd love it too.
They would love it too. But either side's going to love it, isn't it?
I think
it depends who it benefits.
Yeah. I don't know how that would slide though in the US, because as you said, look, the Republican probably won't like that. To say, we're going to have another year or 2 years or however long this war, the suspension of the Constitution will take. But let the right have guns, innit? That's when the Civil War will kick off. If you're going to say that we can't have an election, our democratic right, after having Biden for 4 years, after that was a rigged election already, and now you're going to say that we have to keep him on for longer, or if he steps down and Kamala comes in, which could happen. I don't think the right will take nicely to that. I think a lot of I think a lot of America would have a revolt almost, and that would be the Civil War. But that could be the Civil War.
But maybe that's what they want.
Yeah, well, ultimately that is what they want, isn't it?
We've talked about both sides want that. I mean, it doesn't matter. We talked about when we did the Trump assassination. It doesn't matter who you're siding with. They're all working for the elites.
Yeah. The elites are the Black Rocks.
There's so many ways you can bring this into play.
Yeah.
All of these things into play. The Civil War, more war, World War III, and all that sort of stuff. It's perfectly poised for that.
Yeah.
No, in my opinion, it's about that waiting game now. Like, what's really going to happen? But remember, nothing happens quickly. The thing is, people lack patience, right? Because people always say like, well, when's this going to happen? When is it going to happen? It doesn't happen overnight. No. You honestly think World War I just happened overnight? One day we won't have war, and tomorrow World War I. No,
they just had all the boats and planes
it was
ready.
A slow progression over years before it got to that point. Same with World War II. Any war. It doesn't happen straight away. They didn't go straight into Iraq. 9/11 had to happen. Then weeks later, they went into Afghanistan. And then they were like, oh, let's go into Iraq now. Like, we got the opportunity. Yeah. And that happened years later. It didn't happen straight away. These things take time. Because they got to put their pieces, everyone's moving their chess pieces around
first.
Staircase. You've got to strategize and say, right, we need a base here, we need a base there, we need these weapons here, we need these weapons
there. The logistics involved of it.
Before we go to war, what's the logistics going to look like for us? If you look at China, Taiwan, where's the US? The US has to position itself somewhere to be able to fight Taiwan. So far away from home, you're going to plant your bases in Taiwan, but to be able to get that constant supply chain into you to be able to fight this war, you've got to look at logistically where how's it going to work out.
Yeah.
So a lot of people don't understand that, and they'll be like, well, it should happen now. If you're saying it, no, it'll happen. It just takes time.
Yeah,
it takes
step by step. I think people forget things are moving pretty quick. If you think COVID was 5 years ago, we talk about 9/11, that's almost 25 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
There has been a
multiple wars in there.
Multiple wars within that. Obviously, if you're going to go back, World War II is not even 100 years ago.
Yeah.
We're talking about, World War II is a whole other topic, but that's not even 100 years ago.
But I'm saying since 9/11, there's been multiple wars. What's going to happen?
And within that, of course.
I mean, even that CIA agent that I just showed you now, earlier on with the one with the headband or whatever, he did another clip and he turned around and said, currently there's 140 conflicts in the world right now. And I've always known there's loads of conflicts going on. We just don't, our media just doesn't report anything because we don't have interest, or we are involved and they don't want us, the people, knowing what's going on. So, but it was interesting, but that's the point I think what she's pointing out is
elections coming
that they could pull something like that.
I wouldn't be surprised if they did.
I wouldn't be surprised.
I mean, like, they could, I don't know. The election is coming up pretty soon now, isn't it? November for inauguration for January.
But the thing is that I don't know how they're going to twist it, because didn't Trump try to put it off the last election because obviously it was during lockdown? He was trying to say no, but he goes, I don't want it to be done by mail.
Mail, yeah. He was trying to stop that mail ballot.
That's what
he's like, we still need...
He wasn't trying to stop the election.
No,
he was trying to say...
He still wanted to be done properly.
Yeah, like...
But because of COVID... And
because we don't know by mail who's doing what. Yeah, who's voting. Who are these people?
I mean, that's the thing in it where, you know, obviously...
There's a dodge one.
People say, oh, it wasn't rigged, and stop hating on it. But if you actually really look into it, it was very, very shady.
But that's what you're saying. That is concerning, I have to admit as well.
And yeah, it's coming up soon.
But play the next clip. I always want to try and throw in a Piers Morgan clip somewhere.
Okay.
And he's speaking to a guy called Geoffrey Sachs. I don't know too much about this Geoffrey Sachs, but I liked the debate that went on between them about Ukraine and Russia. Yeah. So we'll watch it and then we'll give our take, because Piers is a quality one, right? I just watched him with that Mehdi.
He can be. He has his moments, isn't it? Yeah.
Mehdi Hassan. Have you heard of him?
No.
He's like, he's a British-born Muslim, but he's he's a bit of a, what's the word I'm looking for? Activist / debater type individual, like highly intelligent, good guy, makes some really good points. Just I saw a clip recently. I just put it on our TikTok page where he chews up Piers Morgan and spits him back out. But I like watching his stuff about Piers Morgan, because sometimes I look at Piers and I go, all right, you got a good point there, and then sometimes I listen to him and I'm like, now you're just pushing the bullshit.
Yeah, that's
yeah. So, but we'll watch this clip and then we'll give our thoughts on it. Yeah,
cool.
You seem very reliant on accepting Putin's worldview rather than perhaps the stark reality of the barbarism with which he's executed this war.
Yeah, maybe because I know too much about the United States, because the first war in Europe after World War II was the U.S. bombing of Belgrade for 78 days to change borders of a European state. The idea was to break Serbia, to create Kosovo as an enclave, and then to install Bondesteel, which is the largest NATO base in the Balkans, in the Southwest Balkans. So the U.S. started this under Clinton, that we will break the borders, we will illegally bomb another country. We didn't have any UN authority. This was a, quote, NATO mission to do that. Then I know the United States went to war repeatedly, illegally, in what it did in Afghanistan, and then what it did in Iraq, and then what it did in Syria, which was the Obama administration, especially Obama and Hillary Clinton, tasking the CIA to overthrow Bashar al-Assad, and then what it did with NATO illegally bombing Libya to topple Muammar Gaddafi, and then what it did in Kiev in February 2014. I happened to see some of that with my own eyes. The U.S. overthrew Yanukovych together with right-wing Ukrainian military forces. We overthrew a president. And what's interesting, by the way, is we overthrew Yanukovych the day after the European Union representatives had reached an agreement with Yanukovych to have early elections, a government of national unity, and a stand-down of both sides. That was agreed. The next thing that happens is the opposition, quote unquote, says we don't agree. They stormed the government buildings and they deposed Yanukovych. And within hours, the United States says, yes, we support the new government. It didn't say, oh, we had an agreement. That's unconstitutional what you did. So we overthrew a government, contrary to a promise that the European Union had made. And by the way, Russia, the United States, and the EU were parties to that agreement. And the United States, an hour afterwards, backed the coup. Okay, so everyone's got a little bit to answer for. In 2015, the Russians did not say, we want the Donbass back. They said peace should come through negotiations. And negotiations between the ethnic Russians in the east of Ukraine and this new regime in Kiev led to the Minsk II agreement. The Minsk II agreement was voted by the UN Security Council unanimously. It was signed by the government of Ukraine. It was guaranteed explicitly by Germany and France. And you know what? And it's been explained to me, in person, it was laughed at inside the US government. This is after the UN Security Council unanimously accepted it. The Ukrainians said, we don't want to give autonomy to the region. Oh, but that's part of the treaty. The US told them, don't worry about it. Angela Merkel explained in Die Zeit, in a notorious interview after the 2022 escalation, she said, oh, you know, we knew that Minsk II was just a holding pattern to give Ukraine time to build its strength. No, Minsk II was a UN Security Council unanimously adopted treaty that was supposed to end the war. So when it comes to who's trustworthy, who to believe, and so forth, I guess my problem, Piers, is I know the United States government. I know it very well. I don't trust them for a moment. I want these two sides actually to sit down in front of the whole world and say, these are the terms. Then the world can judge, because we could get on paper clearly for both sides of the world. We're not going to overthrow governments anymore, the United States needs to say. We accept this agreement, the United States needs to say. Russia needs to say we're not stepping 1 foot farther than whatever the boundary is actually reached. And NATO's not going to enlarge. And let's put it for the whole world to see. You know, once in a while, treaties actually hold. I was born in 1954, and I've seen nothing but U.S. wars of choice and CIA ops my whole life. And since I became an international development specialist more than 40 years ago, I've seen many of them up close. And I'm tired of them. You know, a very good book written in 2017 by a professor at Boston College named Lindsay O'Rourke has the title Covert Regime Change. She studies, Piers, no fewer than 64 covert regime change operations by the United States, almost all of them CIA-led. 64 during the period 1947 to 1989. I've had heads of state say to me personally, Piers, they're gonna take me out, was the term that one of them used. And I assured them, this president it was Haitian president, no, we're gonna get all this sorted out, in my naive way. They walked this president, this was Aristide, out to an unmarked plane, flew him 23 hours in this coup that the US arranged to Central African Republic, and in a broad daylight launched a coup. And when I tried to get the New York Times to at least cover the story, I wanted to read about it, I was told by the reporter on the beat, oh, our editors aren't interested in that. So you can have coups in broad daylight. I've seen the United States launch wars all over the world that Americans and others don't even know were caused by the United States. It was only decades after the fact that Zbig Brzezinski told us that he had urged successfully Jimmy Carter to support the jihadists, the Mujahideen, to try to overthrow the government in Afghanistan in 1979 to lure the Soviets into a trap. That would be their Vietnam. We messed up Afghanistan for more than 4 decades in that little typical US regime change.
But if you
Shady shit,
yeah, I was going to say. Like, the US, I mean, this is where it sounds contradictory, because obviously them being the global power they are, you know, I have a lot of respect for what they can achieve.
Yeah.
But at the same time, history has proven that they are dodgy as well.
Yeah.
And
most of the conflicts in the world are because of them.
Of them.
There's no one else. But like, he talks about the Minsk I and Minsk II agreements and stuff like that. I remember researching them years ago. I can't remember all the details of it all. But again, this is like what the Ukrainian government was trying to literally do, I believe, to the Russians that live in Ukraine. So when Ukraine broke off from the Soviet Union, obviously there was the Donbass area, which was predominantly Russian, but it's part of Ukraine. So those people aren't going to uproot and now their lives, they stayed there, but then it's like an attack on them as well. So this is where Putin was getting involved. Like, we still got Russians in your country, and you're not going to treat them like this. Do you know what I mean? And it breaks down, I'm going to play some more Truth in Media clips as well.
Yeah.
He breaks it down beautifully, like in terms of what's going on over there, yeah, and what's led to it and what's happened in the past and stuff like that. But the fact that, you know, I do like seeing Piers Morgan get schooled sometimes. He's like, shut up, mate. Yeah, but he covered a lot of things on there. You know, someone clearly who's an expert in it, who's seen a lot of things that the US have done over time. You know, I always just bring it back to the simple one, which everyone knows about, because it was all over the news, which was Iraq. That's enough for you to tell you what your governments, the Western governments, are like. So,
and that's the thing as well with Iraq. People, you know, even the common people that maybe not too deep into conspiracy theories, but whenever you talk about the 9/11 and we're going into Iraq, most people will say it's about oil. Like they understand to a degree that there is a conspiracy to it, but they never take it further and say, hold on, if they're going to do that for oil, what else have they done? People don't really take it steps further, but they recognize that the US is dodgy.
But they
close their eyes to what else there is.
But I'm gonna play another clip where a Ukrainian journalist kind of tries to take on Putin, and I just thought it was an interesting clip to play. I'm gonna play it back. But what I liked about the clip is how Putin is very calm all the time. He's very in control of himself, and you don't see that on the opposite side. You don't see that with Kamala, Biden. You don't see that with Rishi or even now Kears. But he's always, I feel like he's very calculated, which is kind of, you respect, but also is kind of frightening as well, because you think if this guy's that calm and all of this is going on, how he's probably constantly thinking rationally and thinking strategy. Well, they say, and potentially maybe 3 or 4 steps ahead of you all the time as well.
They say confidence comes from knowledge.
Yeah.
If you don't know your shit, then you're gonna not be confident. But if you're confident, it's because you know your shit.
Yeah.
And so when someone like Putin is demonstrating confidence in himself and in what he's about to say, it's because he knows some shit.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. But let's play the clip, yeah?
Скандала не будет, как и не было. Владимир Владимирович, я хотел спросить, вот, а сколько вы тратите денег на оккупированный Донбасс? Вот там же нищета под вашим руководством. А люди превратились в рабов России, если называть вещи своими именами. Вот вы боитесь ядерной войны и одновременно не только к войне с НАТО готовитесь. Вы анализируете постоянно рейтинги, и скажется впечатление, что вы как бы... Я не анализирую, смотрю на них. Вы же их печатаете. Что вмешиваетесь тем самым в избирательный процесс, как когда-то делали в Соединенных Штатах. Не кажется ли вам, что может так получиться, что прямого диалога между президентом Украины и России не будет до того момента, пока вы не поменяете место работы? Спасибо.
Значит, по поводу страданий людей, которые живут на Донбассе. Вот вы же гражданин Украины, и вы считаете этих людей гражданами своей страны. Скажите, пожалуйста, кто установил блокаду между Донбассом и остальной частью Украины? Разве Россия это сделала? Это сделали украинские власти. Ввели сплошную экономическую блокаду территории, которые они считают своей. И они стреляют по этим гражданам, которых считают своими гражданами. Там каждый день почти люди гибнут, мирные причем. Действительно оказываем гуманитарную и другую помощь и поддержку людям, которые... и только для того, чтобы их окончательно там не раздавили, и будем это делать дальше. Потому что попытка решить вопросы политического характера с помощью силы, а мы видим это на протяжении нескольких лет со стороны, они обречены на провал. Вот это надо понять. Теперь по поводу того, что как урегулировать отношения и кто останется у власти, кто не останется, дело не в персонале, дело в отношениях к людям. Мы хотим, чтобы на всей территории Украины, в том числе и на Донбассе, был мир и процветание. Мы заинтересованы в этом, потому что Украина остается одним из наших крупнейших торгово-экономических партнеров. Торговый оборот между Украиной и Россией, несмотря на все усилия сегодняшних киевских властей, растет, в том числе вырос за уходящий год. Это не странно? Нет, не странно, потому что это естественные связи. И эти естественные связи когда-нибудь все-таки дадут о себе знать. Но пока в киевских коридорах власти находятся русофобы, не понимающие в чем, собственно говоря, интерес своего собственного народа, такая ненормальная ситуация будет продолжаться, вне зависимости от того, кто находится у власти в Кремле.
So obviously he was trying to come at Putin there a little bit about the Donbass and saying that, oh, you've left it in poverty, you've crushed it and done this and you're not helping them and stuff like that. But Putin came back and just said, well, hold on, what is your government? Do you consider them your people in the Donbass? Yes. Would you say your government does? Yes. So why have they put economic blockades on that region? Why are they shooting the citizens, their own citizens? Why, do you know what I mean? Why are all these things happening to them? Why is your own government doing this to them? We're there to help them. We're there to give them aid. That's why we stepped in. But you haven't. But your government's doing the opposite and has been for some time.
That's really bad though, isn't it?
And don't look good on that journalist because it just shows that you're a shit journalist because you didn't do your research.
Yeah, no shit, innit?
But that just exposes journalism today. But that's why, like I said, Putin is very confident. He's knowledgeable. Do you know what I mean? And he sits there, and when you put a question, he's all nice and calm. Oh, I'll answer that question.
Yeah.
Bam. Here you go. And then you saw the journalist who's like, okay.
Yeah, stay silent and then just listen.
So you're not getting told everything.
No.
And even the journalist, the information they're getting from Western governments and stuff like that isn't the truth because he's sitting there like now and he's like, oh shit, I look like a real idiot now. First, he was smug when he was putting that question towards him, and then it was like Nigel Farage. Remember that girl?
Yeah.
Same thing. And now he left you like, shit.
Silenced.
Do you know what I mean? Like, but
this is the thing that Western media is not going to talk about. How, say for example that region in Donbass has a Russian population, and actually Putin is supporting
and
protecting them, while the Ukrainian government is actually firing on its own citizens. And I think this is not making the news, and people don't know that.
You're claiming they're your own people, but you're treating them like they're invading hordes, and you need to get them under control or something like that.
And it's interesting as well that he mentioned that obviously Ukraine and Russia being so closely connected have such a good trade partnership as well, and even despite the war, trade has gone up.
Yeah,
and so as Putin says, like, question then who is actually running stuff? Yeah. How is it actually? It doesn't matter who's in the Kremlin.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who's in Kiev. There's something there's something bigger going on.
Yeah.
Damn, that's scary.
That's deep, wasn't it? That's a good clip, man.
Yeah, Putin's actually, I don't want to say he's the guy in it because obviously I'm not taking any sides. As we've said numerous times, war is not what we want, and innocent.
I'm not saying he's perfect, Jay. He's got his own, like we talked at the beginning about, we touched on like oligarchs in Russia and stuff like that. Yeah, he has a lot of like, do you know what I mean? I'm not saying he's perfect or anything like that, but when I listen to two sides, when I have to listen to these two leaders, I'm listening to Zelensky. When I listen to Putin, I can't lie, I feel more convinced by Putin. Yeah. Zelensky definitely looks like someone, like, for me, and we're going to get into this, he's wearing these military green outfits all the time.
It is.
He's doing photo shoots of him like
wearing
a wartime. Like, you are not at war, mate. Your people are at war. You're hiding in some bunker or living in some apartment outside of Ukraine, probably. Yeah.
In it. Why does he do that? He wears like that great green T-shirt.
Because he's trying to make it like he's a war finger, but he's going to these
wearing boots and everything.
He's going to the US Congress and he's coming over to the UK dressed like that, and I'm like, mate, put a suit on.
Innit? What's he doing?
Like, I look at him, I go, but when he started doing that, I go, I'm not trusting you because you're trying to sell. He's an actor. We all know he used to be an actor who's now trying to use props to make it look like he's and notice he doesn't shave anymore. He keeps like this
rugged
little beard thing going. Like, mate, are you serious? Yeah, even Winston Churchill shaved. Yeah, right. Okay, so and put a suit on. As a leader, he didn't walk around in army greens. Yeah, right. Yeah. And what he's trying to do is he's using his acting experience here, trying to like sell you. And I feel like, no, I don't know whether I fully trust you because you're trying to sell me a gimmick right now, an image of yourself, like you're at the front line with your.
As if he's not going to get into the back of the Mercedes at the end
strategy with the generals when you don't know what you're talking about. The generals are running the show. Do you know what I mean? And the strategy is like you're not going to involve in this. You're just walking around the world trying to make it look like you're this great leader, and you're not.
In comparison, Putin
like you would in the movie,
seems like he's involved in it a little bit.
I think he's involved in it a lot more. I think strategically he's involved.
He's involved in it.
He's a lot more. I think he's strategically involved in what
sure.
His generals are saying. Well, what's going on? Okay, explain this to me.
Yeah,
and he'll sit there intelligently saying, "That I don't like that. Doesn't make sense. Doesn't leave us open here." Yeah, so we're going. Do you know what I mean? Whereas Zelensky, someone else is pulling the strings. And he's just like, here's your script today, go and sell that. That's the feeling I get.
Yeah,
and I'm not saying, like I said, I'm not saying Putin's better or anything like that. I don't trust no politicians and no leaders in this world. But
looking at both sides of it,
if I'm going to be objective, if I'm going to try and be objective, and then you're saying to me, well, who feel giving you the correct information? I feel more confident Putin's giving me that correct information. And what I've done research years ago, I did that research, which is like, what is this Minsk and Minsk 2? And
yeah.
I remember years. You remember when Russia? This was under Obama. And Russia then tried moving into Ukraine. And I thought, whoa, is he going to try and take Ukraine? He's going to try and build the old Soviet Union back or something like that. And he turned around and they were saying, oh, we're not going to return to the old Soviet Union. This was the US at the time, which was under Obama. All of them were saying that. But no, I was like, why is he doing that for? Is there a reason for this? And then they started talking about Minsk agreements. And I thought, what is that? And I looked at the Minsk agreement 1, 2, and I thought, oh, there's Russians still living in Ukraine that get treated like shit.
Shit.
And Putin said, yeah, I'm not having that shit. Those are still my people. And I'm going to deal with you if you carry on treating them like that. Is basically what he said. And that's why they came up with those agreements, those treaties. But then you clearly heard what he said, Jeffrey Sachs say, that they laughed at those. Yeah, that's just to bide us some time.
Yeah.
And now look what's happened.
Shit.
Crazy, right?
Shady.
Cool. Let's go to the next clip. And this is really about why else is Ukraine so important to both sides? Yeah? Right? We're going to play this clip and then we'll chop it up.
If Russia gets the Donbas, especially, and controls even more, because in the center of Ukraine there is the Dobra block lithium deposit, which is much richer and much better and much more exploitable. Then, of course, the situation for Europe gets worse, because Europe could get most of the minerals necessary for energy transition from Ukraine. And Ukraine, by that, could finance the reconstruction of its country, which will cost much, much more than the World Bank estimates. So if we can drive Putin out of all these areas, it's a big, big benefit, not only for energy transition in Europe, but also the reconstruction of Ukraine. And that is, of course, what Putin doesn't want.
Yeah.
And let me add one word. Even if he only controls Donbas, all the rest of the region is at risk. And do you want to invest if the region is at risk? No.
They're sitting on 10 to 12 trillion dollars of critical minerals in Ukraine. They could be the richest country in all of Europe. I don't want to give that money and those assets to Putin to share with China. If we help Ukraine now, they can become the best business partner we ever dreamed of. That 10 to 12 trillion dollars of critical mineral assets could be used by Ukraine and the West, not given to Putin and China. This is a very big deal how Ukraine ends. Let's help them win a war we can't afford to lose. Let's find a solution to this war. But they're sitting on a gold mine to give Putin 10 or 12 trillion dollars of critical minerals that he will share with China is ridiculous.
So like I always say, war is about power, money, control, and profits. Yeah. Again, Ukraine is rich in minerals.
I did not know that.
I didn't know that either, and I found out recently. Yeah. So again, right, we're talking about land ownership of BlackRock, owning land. So if they own a land and there's lithium under there, and you want to dig it up, BlackRock's going to say, well, I'll cut 70%, thanks. Right? You're controlling a resource that is now very much needed by the West.
Everywhere
and they want to control
electric cars and all that crazy.
But China want it too. Yeah. Russia want it too. They all know that lithium deposits and stuff like that, they need it. You know, we're talking about, at the beginning, they were talking about how Ukraine is the bread basket of the world and most of our wheat comes from there and yada, yada, yada. They want to control this. No. This is it. This is what they want.
It's bigger than that, yeah.
That's just crazy again. So again, it's about resource again.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's other things that's involved that we've just covered off, but that plays a part. Again, like Iraq, like
massive
Syria,
part, yeah.
like Libya. We want your resource. And let's not forget, I said it before, Russia has a lot of resources as well. Oil, gas, we want to control that too. Hence why NATO keeps getting closer and closer. NATO is just an expansion of the US government and its military. It was created by them and the Brits after World War II. Just like the new UN.
Yeah.
So when you talk UN, I think US and Britain. When you say NATO, I say US and Britain again. Because these are the guys who founded it. But again, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, when you say UN, I think Rockefellers.
Yeah. You know what I mean? But I'm talking about from a government point of view.
Yeah, but this is the thing, like we were saying about who's actually in charge, and you know, when we look at like the Black Rocks and stuff like that, they're all part of the same. And you know, as you said, even on the Russian side with the oligarchs, but at the highest level, they're probably all on the same sides. And it's all about, as you said, resources, power, money, profits, and it's a big factor in the innocent dying.
Crazy, isn't it? And then this thing that last bit that you just touched on, the innocent are dying. Yeah, the poor and the working class. You, the pawns who are being manipulated into choosing a side and push an agenda, are not seeing the bigger picture because they're not giving you all the information, and you're too lazy to go and do your own research. But we'll play another clip now. This is old George Soros.
Oh.
Another one of our favourites, Treble.
Still about, yeah. He might go soon though, surely.
Yeah, but I think his son will just rightly take over, and he's got kids, man. He's trained them well.
That's the thing as well, isn't it? There's a whole line to come into it.
What he's been doing for years, his son has now been doing for years. So he's got to pick up where he leaves off.
Yeah.
When the Soviet Union, the Soviet Empire collapsed, and as the empire collapsed, I moved in and picked up the pieces. First in Hungary in 1984, and then Poland in 87, China in 87 as well. So this is how the Soros Empire was replacing the Soviet Empire.
And how do you think you're doing in your imperial ambitions?
I know you're itching to give your thoughts on that.
That's dark, bro. The Soros Empire. This guy's moving like a Sith Lord. Like Emperor Palpatine or something. Like, what? Soros Empire to replace the Soviet Empire. That's mad.
Like, he's essentially a what you call I've got a book on it. I've not read it properly, but he's an economic hitman.
Yeah.
He goes in. I mean, he did it to what did he do to the UK? Remember, he nearly devalued the British pound and nearly crashed it.
And then ready to pick up the pieces.
Yeah, that's what he was trying to do. But it didn't go that way, luckily for us.
Yeah.
But he nearly crashed it, and he was going to then pick up the pieces, and then you control the economy that way as well. But this is what we're talking. That's an example of the kind of elites we're talking about. These guys have been around donkey years. People like him, Henry Kissinger. But Kissinger's obviously passed on now, isn't he?
Yeah.
But he was around for years. You know, you mentioned Rockefellers, Rothschilds. These guys have been around for a long time, man.
JP Morgans.
Yeah, JP Morgans. Do you know what I mean? These guys have been around a long, long time. The Black Rocks are like the new age versions of those guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. But guys have been around a long time, and you're like, people go, oh God, they used to own banks. Yeah, they don't own them anymore. What's the greatest trick the devil's ever pulled?
Pretending it doesn't exist.
Exactly. So why are they going to put their business out there for you to know that? How do they get you? How do they get your money and get you enslaved? Well, first they've got to let you know, well, we used to be around and our family used to do this and we no longer have a part in this. And yes, every state bank the government controls, we don't control any of them anymore. Blah, 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 blah. Shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
These guys work in the shadows. Yeah, half of you don't even know who George Soros is.
Well, this is the funny thing, isn't it?
Like,
people don't even know who George Soros is. But
this is the kind of guy that causes wars.
I mean, he was also funding BLM.
Yeah.
Like, people donating money was actually donating it to him.
Yeah. But no. But what he did was he was funding what he did. He gave like BLM, I think 100 million.
Yeah.
Right. By doing that, you control now BLM.
Yeah.
So all these people who are BLM supporters out there don't realise that. Now, where did that money go to? Right. Candace Owens already exposed that for all tax returns and all that sort of stuff. They line their own pockets. Therefore, the actual organisation BLM, the political organisation, split that money between themselves. Mm-hmm. None of it went into black communities.
Nope.
None of it went to you, the person out there. The ones that got arrested, you black people out there who got arrested for BLM. Did they come and bail you out? Did they pay your court fees for you? Nope.
Well, it's interesting because they also fund the police.
Yeah. There you go, innit?
And they own the prison systems and everything.
So
that's the Soros empire, guys.
But that's just an idea of the kind of people you're dealing with that you're not seeing. They work in the shadows. You're never going to see them. It's hard to get a picture sometimes of George Soros. Imagine being around that long doing the stuff he's been doing, and yet you can't get him. You can only get minimal pictures of him or repeated pictures of him or a quick snap of him somewhere. But you can't actually get a full-blown interview unless he wants to give it to you.
Yeah.
You know? He's just talking about what he did
to
certain countries after the Soviet Union crashed.
It's an empire, you know?
We built our empire on their bones, basically.
Oh, gosh.
Do you know what I mean? On that empire's bones. So, like, you know, where people turn around and say, oh, you know, conspiracy. Like, you know what the other thing is? Like, why don't you believe it? Why aren't you open to the idea of it?
Well, this is the thing. People will always say it's a conspiracy, but they can never say it's a lie.
True.
That's the thing. Whenever we have these conversations, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. Oh, it's just a conspiracy. But they never, ever say
give you evidence
you're a liar.
Yeah. But anyway, let's move on, yeah? So let's start with, I guess, the next clip I probably want to try to get from Truth and Media. And I think this one was called, Who is Zelensky?
Okay.
All right, so let's start there.
That's a very important one.
Company named after his improv group. In 2012, he and his company joined Ukrainian network 1+1, owned by one of Ukraine's most notorious oligarchs, Igor Kolomoisky. Kolomoisky has been accused of a number of crimes, ranging from embezzlement to murder.
Zelensky was picked by this oligarch Kolomoisky. He's also the same man that is funded Azov, which to me makes no sense because this oligarch is Jewish.
3 years after Zelensky joined Kolomoisky's company, he starred in the network's hit TV series called The Servant of the People. I told you to remember that name. It was about a teacher who unwittingly becomes a viral sensation for being caught ranting on camera about corruption in Ukraine.
Василий Петрович Голобородько? Да. Доброе утро, господин президент.
Well, get this. A few years later, Zelensky's production company registered a political party called Servant of the People, just like their hit show. Zelensky became the frontrunner in the 2019 election as soon as he announced his candidacy. That announcement was made during a special broadcast aired on Kolomoisky's network. During this time, war had been raging in the Donbas region of Ukraine since 2014. In that year, a coup ousted the democratically elected government of Viktor Yanukovych, a Russian ally. An ultra-nationalist Ukraine regime took over, and the ethnic Russian region of the Donbas refused to recognize the coup government. An intense civil war broke out. Thousands were killed. It's a civil war that raged from 2014 until 2022. 5 years after the start of that civil war and on the campaign trail, candidate Zelensky made peace his #1 priority.
I just supported him because he wanted peace in Ukraine, and that was the main thing why people in Ukraine supported him. More than 70% of people wanted peace.
He promised, I will talk to President Putin. I will meet with the Russians. We will end this war. And once he became president, he seems to have done a 180-degree change and has been the obedient servant of Washington.
So Zelensky won office as a pro-peace candidate, but then once elected, his tone changed, almost as if he was two different men. No longer an advocate for peace, the new president of Ukraine began arguing that his country needed to join NATO, even though Russia had long considered that to be a red line. That red line exists because Russia is surrounded by NATO from virtually every angle.
Коли українці будуть всі готові, ми обов'язково винесемо це питання на референдум, і Україна обов'язково буде в НАТО.
Although Zelensky is a native Russian speaker, he jumped on ultra-nationalist campaigns to curtail the use of his mother tongue. Let me tell you how he did this. So right before Zelensky took office in 2019, Ukraine passed a law making Ukrainian the mandatory language for use by government officials. This curbed the use of Russian. Now, I want to show you something else, because what many in the West fail to understand is that this is a major problem, because 22% of Ukrainians speak Russian as their native language. The law also outlawed teaching in Russian and required everyone in the country learn Ukrainian. Under Zelensky's watch, in January of 2021, that 2019 law was expanded, requiring service industry employees to talk to customers in Ukrainian first. According to the law, this is not a suggestion, this is law, they could only switch languages if customers asked to switch. Then the following year, another law was passed which required domestic media to print in Ukrainian. In June of 2022, Zelensky signed another discriminatory decree, this one restricting the availability of Russian books and Russian music. Laws seeking the eradication of Russian culture and language are indicative of how radical nationalism has entered the mainstream of Ukrainian society.
You know, and really, you know, it's amazing to see, you know, and I think that, you know, 8 years ago, there was a lot less pro-Nazi, anti-Russian sentiment than there is today. And they just really pumped up the propaganda, and a lot of people that didn't used to believe it are now believing it.
After reversing earlier positions on language, Zelensky's image was further tarnished with the release of 2021's Pandora Papers. According to leaked documents, Zelensky and his inner circle held 10 offshore shadow companies which did business with Zelensky's old boss, the oligarch Igor Kolomoisky. Kolomoisky was accused of stealing $5.5 billion from investors in a pyramid scheme he orchestrated through his bank. This led to accusations that Zelensky was getting rich off Kolomoisky's crimes. Through these shell companies, Zelensky and his partners reportedly purchased about $8 million worth of real estate in London. By October of 2021, Zelensky, who was elected with 73% of the vote, again under promises to bring peace to the Donbas region and to end corruption in Ukraine, had failed to deliver on his promises. He had, in fact, done the opposite, and his approval rating hovered at around 27%. But then, just 4 months later, the story surrounding Vladimir Zelensky dramatically changed. Russia crossed Ukraine's border with soldiers and tanks in what the Russian government called a special military operation, and then it happened. Zelensky traded his suit and tie for olive green. Well, kind of olive green everything, right? And overnight became a darling of Western media. The timing was perfect. In fact, maybe too perfect.
So he's put forward as a, you know, it's the traditional Marvel Comics hero-villain scenario. He's a hero, he's a good guy, stands for everything good, and he's attacked by the equivalent of Lex Luthor in a Superman movie, which would be the evil Vladimir Putin. And they've been, you know, pretty successful with that in the United States simply because that's the only story that's allowed to get out.
So Zelensky was made into a hero, and Russia was labeled the aggressor, wanting only to rebuild the old Soviet Union. But the truth is that the 2022 invasion was far from unprovoked. Despite what you're going to hear in establishment mainstream media, Russia had spent decades warning of dire consequences if NATO continued to expand, and months urging the United States and NATO to formally declare that Ukraine would not join their military alliance. Only months after Russia's 2022 invasion, there were signs that this conflict would be a short-lived one. Reports came out that Ukraine and Russia were coming to a peace agreement. Foreign Affairs stated that, quote, according to multiple former senior U.S. officials we spoke with, in April of 2022, Russian and Ukrainian negotiators appeared to have tentatively agreed on the outline of a negotiated interim settlement.
In fact, Ukraine was already touting that, okay, we've almost got agreement, we have this and that that's not quite agreed. And then the Prime Minister of Great Britain, Boris Johnson, came flying into Kiev unannounced, and he had to sit down with Zelensky and told him in no uncertain terms, you're going to get back to war, you know, cut out this business of talking peace.
Here's former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett discussing the Ukraine-Russia peace deal, which he says was sabotaged.
צריך להמשיך להכות בפוטין ולא להגיע, אבל שאל מול, זאת אומרת, הגישה היותר תקיפה, אני אגיד לך משהו, אני לא יודע להגיד שהם שגו, ומתווך, אבל הכתובת שלי זה אמריקה בעניין הזה, ואני לא פועל על דעת עצמי. כל פעולה שעשיתי הייתה מתואמת לפרטי פרטים, גם עם ארצות הברית, גם עם גרמניה, גם עם צרפת.
אז הם בעצם חדלו את זה?
בגדול, כן. בגדול הם חדלו את זה.
Had the United States and Great Britain not intervened at that moment, had the peace talks been allowed, this war would have ended with some minor boundary changes. Of course, Crimea would have gone back to Russia, where it's always belonged. Portions of the Donbass would have gone to Russia. But for the most part, stability would have been restored.
After it was declared that peace was not an option, the deaths mounted and repression escalated.
I had to flee Ukraine in last year, not because of the Russians, but because I was threatened I had death threats to my life. And I had to flee Ukraine because I wanted peace.
Gonzalo Lira was a popular Chilean-American blogger who died as a political prisoner in Ukraine. His alleged crime was that he voiced opinions online that differed from the Ukrainian government. Lira granted us an exclusive interview a year after he was detained for the first time. And here's what he said to us when we asked about the possibility of false flag operations being conducted by Ukraine's military.
They arrested me, they interrogated me, and I was, released, but the fact is that, how can I put this carefully? I don't want to create the conditions or the excuse to lose my liberty at this time. And so I'm going to have to decline. After this conflict is over, I'm happy to tell you exactly incidents that I think were not what they were claimed to be.
Soon after this interview, Lira was arrested and imprisoned. In messages posted to his Twitter account after he was released on bail, Lira claimed that he was beaten and tortured while in custody. He recorded this message on July 31st, 2023, just 3 months after our interview.
So either I will cross the border into Hungary in the next couple of hours, or I will be arrested again, and God knows what will happen to me.
Lira didn't make it to Hungary. He was rearrested for breaching the terms of his bail, and he died while imprisoned just months after he recorded this message. Lira is not alone in facing persecution for voicing criticism toward Kiev. Opposition political parties and politicians have been banned in Ukraine, and Ukraine's parliament has even voted to shut down the Orthodox Church. In December of 2022, Ukraine passed a law forbidding religious organizations from having ties with Russia. In the aftermath of this law's passage, several priests were arrested and 50 people were interrogated. In March of 2023, Ukraine's most historic monastery, the Kiev Petrus Lavra, was raided and parts of it were shut down. Metropolitan Pavel Lebed is the head of the Orthodox Church in Kiev. He granted us an interview 2 days before he was arrested.
Меня спросили, когда я виделся с Путиным. Я им ответил, тогда, когда и вы. Когда Путин приезжал в Киев, то вы общались, я не общаюсь и не имею никакого отношения.
Nearly a year into Russia's war with Ukraine, and now most analysts are quietly admitting that Ukraine has no chance, despite the massive numbers of weapons, tanks, defense systems, and don't forget the $100 billion poured in by the United States and Western Europe. Russia has control over most of the Donbas region, and Ukraine's much-hyped counteroffensive has been an utter failure. This isn't a surprise. Many analysts who didn't make it onto mainstream media outlets predicted Ukraine's loss as soon as the conflict started. Given this stalemate, territorial control now currently divided on lines that have been previously agreed to by Russia and Ukraine, the question remains, why is this war still going on?
Well, it seems very obvious that they didn't shell out all that cash to Zelensky in like big bags or something like that, right? Most of it is going to the American military-industrial complex.
К сожалению, что сегодня нету политиков, а есть политиканты, на котором на смертях, на войне зарабатывают деньги. Вы это прекрасно знаете. Не мне вам говорить, что это делается сегодня. Как списывают и на продукты питания, и на оружие. А все ложится на плечи людей, простых людей. А вот некоторые, которые дорываются до власти, они это все делают, но забывают о том, что они ответят за все.
They will answer to God for everything, he says. So who are they? The they who created the cult of Ukraine's wartime president. We'll investigate and give you details no one else will in our next episode, as we promise to leave Zelensky unmasked.
Yeah, so thoughts?
Whoa, that was deep. I didn't know Truth in Media. They're really good, the way they break it down. Zelensky, I mean, from the very beginning, they show that this guy is literally an actor. Like, how much more fake does it need to be for you guys?
He's a puppet. That's it.
Trained. I think it was so hilarious as well the way he went from suits to green camo, khaki pants, and boots, like
and walking through like he's fighting a war, and he's
it's so obvious that they're trying to manipulate and they're trying to push their narrative. And man, I don't know what to say anymore.
Yeah. All right, listen, we're going to move on to the next clip, yeah? I want to get through these as probably quick as possible, and then we can give our final thoughts. But let's move on to the next clip, yeah? From Truth in Media.
Well, being a journalist in Ukraine is no joke. Over and over, we've been told that Vladimir Zelensky's Ukraine is a bastion of democracy. What you likely don't know is that in this so-called democracy, journalists who question the government could be faced with charges of treason. I'm investigative journalist Ben Swan, and let me give you an example of this. One of the most unknown facts about the war between Russia and Ukraine are the large numbers of civilians who have been forced into Ukraine's military. Now, Ukraine's draft forced all males from 18 to 60 to register. Imagine that happening in the United States. Even as Ukraine's government reportedly refused peace talks, it required by force that all men stay in the country and fight. And that requirement turned journalists who previously had been strongly in support of Ukraine to question their own government and military. One of those journalists is Ruslan Kotsaba, whose experience took him from a hardline Ukrainian nationalist to an impassioned pacifist. And that change of heart landed him in prison. When we explain how and why, we will continue to leave Zelensky unmasked. Journalist Ruslan Kotsaba had been widely considered noble by his followers. After criticizing Ukraine's military draft, Kotsaba was arrested on charges of treason and obstruction of military operations. Kotsaba would soon become Ukraine's highest-profile prisoner of conscience. He spent 524 days in solitary confinement before finally being released, only to face new charges. He has since sought political asylum in the United States and resides in New York.
И, соответственно, я думаю, что проблем с убежищем у меня не будет, но мы же понимаем, если, допустим, сейчас Америка, она, наверное, один из основных бенефициаров этой войны, которая в Украине, ну, соответственно, могут какие-то быть политические влияния на суд, который должен мне.
Journalists who oppose the official narrative have been imprisoned, others killed.
I was born in Dallas, Texas. I lived there when Kennedy was assassinated. I remember it. Pretty wealthy family, very conservative like that. But I grew up understanding why black people wanted equal rights, why young men didn't want to get sent to Vietnam.
Russell Bentley was an American veteran who lived in the Donbass. He moved there as a volunteer, fighting for the local resistance. He retired from fighting to help spread the word of what's really going on there.
I've made a lot of good videos, and that one wasn't even particularly interesting or effective, but it went super viral. It got like multi-million views within the day, you know?
The video that he mentions here, it went so viral that it got him big attention from unexpected places.
But not every American is on the right side. One feisty little fella from Texas went so far as to join the Russian army.
This is Tejas on the front line with the denazifiers and liberators of Ukraine. These guys are tough, these guys are ready, and there's plenty of them. So far, Russia has used about 10% of its military power, and we're getting ready to bring the hammer down. These guys are gonna save and liberate all the good people in Ukraine, and the bad people, boom, kick their ass.
What a spunky little piglet.
Played the whole 40-second video on his show and talked a bunch of shit about me. You know, a bunch of really stupid shit too, by the way.
A year after Bentley granted us this interview, he was killed while filming in the aftermath of the Ukrainian attack in the Donbass. And sadly, he isn't alone. 27 journalists have been killed since the 2014 coup, according to the Committee to Protect Journalists. And 18 of those were killed after Zelensky took office in 2019. In 2021, a full 12 months before Russia's invasion, Zelensky shut down 3 oppositional TV channels claiming they were pro-Kremlin. If you can believe it, this grim picture got a whole lot worse after February of 2022. At that point, all news channels were shut down and only a relative few were allowed to continue airing, except for on a single channel, which is regulated by the government.
I was arrested on April 15th of 2022 by the State Security Services.
Gonzalo Lira was eventually released after his first detainment and granted us an interview, but he was reluctant to answer many of the questions we posed out of fear.
I don't want to create the conditions or the excuse to lose my liberty at this time. And so I'm going to have to decline. But I'm happy to do so once the conflict is over.
Gonzalo Lira did not live long enough to give us a second interview or to see the end of the war. A political prisoner in Ukraine, he died in January of 2024, reportedly of pneumonia. Days before he died, Gonzalo smuggled the following note out from the hospital in which he was held. Quote, "Tell my sister I have double pneumonia, both lungs, as well as pneumothorax, and a very severe case of edema, swelling of the body. All of this started in mid-October, but was ignored by the prison. They only admitted I had pneumonia at a December 22nd hearing."
So the media continues to paint this conflict about democracy, even though Ukraine is increasingly banning religions, outlets, journalists. So if you suddenly say, yeah, but there's all of these things going on that are very undemocratic, how do you sell that to the American people?
Now, media censorship in the United States is starting to parallel Ukraine's draconian policies, under the guise of reining in so-called Russian disinformation. The Twitter files revealed that, at the behest of the Ukrainian government, the FBI tried to censor journalists who complicated government narratives surrounding the war in Ukraine. According to a congressional report, this didn't just happen on Twitter. Also at the behest of Ukraine, the FBI tried to censor content on Google, Facebook, and Instagram.
Нас, пацифистов, не любят обе воюющие стороны. В любом конфликте пацифистов называют агентами противоположной стороны. Допустим, если в Украине меня называют агентом Путина, то я думаю, что в России российских пацифистов назвали бы агентами Коломойского либо там Зеленского.
In an interview with the Democratic Socialist magazine Jacobin, Kotsaba stated, quote, "All opposition figures previously promoting the peaceful resolution of conflict with Russia have either fled or are in prison. Any thought about peace talks is perceived as playing for Putin, as the work of enemy agents." Sound familiar? The same blueprint used in Ukraine to control opposition to the war or silence anyone who speaks out against the escalation of it are called Putin's mouthpiece. We have no doubt the same attacks will be made against this series, but it won't deter us from speaking an unflinching truth. Ukraine is no bastion of free speech or democracy, and no true journalist should be silent about that. Next time on Zelensky Unmasked, we're going to look at political persecution in Ukraine. It's not just journalists who aren't allowed to stand up to Zelensky. We'll explore the locking up of dissenters and the banning of political parties. Well, his is a name you've probably never heard, Gonzalo Lira. Why should you know him? Because his story is a microcosm of the entire Ukraine narrative, a narrative that claims to be one of freedom and democracy, but in fact appears to be shrouded in darkness and oppression. Lira was an American citizen, but for the last 7 years he lived in Ukraine with his Ukrainian wife and 2 young children. He was arrested by the Ukrainian government for justifying Russian aggression against Ukraine, something here in the US we would call free speech. His father says he was tortured, and then Gonzalo Lira's life was taken. I'm investigative journalist Ben Swan, and over the past year, our team has been investigating the true story of Vladimir Zelensky and the war in Ukraine. In that process, we were some of the last people Gonzalo Lira would ever speak to. He granted us an exclusive interview soon after his first detainment, but he was afraid to answer some of our questions. In fact, here's what he told us when we asked him about claims that the Ukrainian military was blaming Russia for crimes that they themselves had committed. Listen.
The fact is that, how can I put this carefully? I don't want to create the conditions or the excuse to lose my liberty at this time. And so I'm going to have to decline. After this conflict is over, I'm happy to tell you exactly incidents that I think were not what they were claimed to be.
Gonzalo Lira did not live long enough to give us a second interview or to see the end of this war. A political prisoner in Ukraine, he died last month, reportedly of pneumonia. Again, his alleged crime, he was never convicted, was voicing an opinion that differed from the Ukrainian government. The same government that we have been told repeatedly is a bastion of freedom in Eastern Europe. Days before he died, Gonzalo smuggled the following note from the hospital in which he was held, and it read this, quote, "Tell my sister, I have double pneumonia, both lungs, as well as pneumothorax and a very severe case of edema, swelling of the body. All of this started in mid-October, but was ignored by the prison. They only admitted I had pneumonia at a December 22nd hearing. A week later, Gonzalo's father, Gonzalo Lira Sr., announced that his son was dead. In a statement, he wrote this, quote, "I cannot accept the way my son has died. He was tortured, extorted, incommunicado for 8 months and 11 days, and the U.S. Embassy did nothing to help my son. My pain is unbearable. The world must know what is going on in Ukraine with that inhumane dictator, Zelensky." I agree. And that is precisely why we decided to make this documentary series, Zelensky Unmasked. As I mentioned, our team has spent over a year researching and conducting dozens of interviews inside and outside of Ukraine to reveal what is really happening and what our U.S. taxpayer dollars are being spent on. You know, here at Truth in Media, we were shocked and we were saddened and disgusted by Gonzalo Lira's death. But we also recognize that Gonzalo Lira is only one death of tens of thousands as a result of this war. Millions more have been displaced, and the question is why? In the cause of freedom, or in the cause of a very few powerful people becoming much more wealthy? We aim to bring justice to these lives that have been so unjustly destroyed. So to see our series, you can follow us on X at truth_in_media, and you can check us out right now at truthinmedia.com.
So clear evidence of Ukrainian propaganda.
Yeah.
Shutting down the media, freedom of the press, who are clearly digging out the truth of what's going on in Ukraine. You know, I mean, it was amazing at the beginning of the Ukrainian war. There was a Russian journalist, and I know you don't really watch mainstream at all. Yeah, but I always tap into it to see the bullshit that's coming. It's important to watch it, not to buy into it, but to understand what's going on, what's being put out there. And there was a Russian journalist who apparently was exposing Putin for the Ukrainian war and what he was doing and what he's up to, what an evil man he is. Yeah, and basically he got arrested and apparently he died in prison or something like that, and they're blaming it on the Russians, right? Which I can understand, there probably might be some truth to that, right? But at the same time, what was worse about it was that journalist was actually caught having meetings with CIA agents.
Really?
Yeah. So he was arrested on espionage, basically in cahoots with the US government and the CIA, right? So naturally, your government's going to arrest you because
you're a spy.
You're Russian, you're a spy, basically. Yeah. You're not a journalist, you're a spy spreading lies. So we're going to arrest you. And then I can't remember the ins and outs of it. Or I was looking up for it while we were watching that clip as I was trying to find it on Google. But that was the bottoms of it. And everyone's like, yeah, look what he did, evil man. He killed a journalist who was trying to reveal the truth. Well, here you go. Here's some evidence of Ukraine doing it constantly to their own people.
That's the thing. It's just sad, isn't it?
You know,
that we're told that Ukraine's the innocent one being viciously attacked by Putin and Russia and stuff, but then, you know, where's the freedom that they're not actually pushing freedom and they're killing their own journalists just trying to shine some light on it.
You're basically covering it up, aren't they?
Yeah.
But let's move on to the next clip. So this is going to be a quick short one. This one should be, if I remember right.
The reality of things in Ukraine are much more grim. Under Zelensky's watch, the Russian language has come under attack, as has the Orthodox Church. Alternative media outlets have been banned, as have opposition political parties. Zelensky's cult-like status in the West is masking the rising tide of authoritarianism in Ukraine. And not just that, it appears that even Zelensky is starting to believe his own hype.
Now he actually believes he's a man of gravitas, that he is Winston Churchill.
Like the original Churchill, Zelensky isn't necessarily all about peace either, even though the PR machine that surrounds him tells us that he is. As numerous military analysts have asked, what's the end game here? There's much agreement that long-term, Ukraine doesn't really have much of a chance in this war. So why is there no effort toward peace?
10 years from now, when they write the history of this conflict, he's going to be the most reviled man in the world because he is responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians. Hundreds of thousands of people he swore to protect, he slaughtered. For what? Because he's addicted to weapons-infused, ego-driven narcissism.
Ukraine is becoming a nation of widows and orphans.
There's 300,000 dead Ukrainians. Douglas McGregor would say 350,000. All right, I'll go on the conservative side there. And 30,000 Russians. I don't know. They say the figure's 10 to 1. Whatever it is. Let's say 400,000, 500,000 altogether. Whatever it is. It all could have been avoided. This all, and you know what? Nobody in D.C. that's connected, whether it be Raytheon, Victoria Nuland, Joe Biden, Lloyd Austin, they don't give a rat's ass about any of those Ukrainian deaths at all.
Zelensky is part of a pattern right now throughout the U.S. empire where you put an actor in place who appears to be making decisions, but he's not. So he's just another one of many. And they bring him out and he does what he's told.
If Zelensky just does what he's told, that would mean he's a hollow leader. It also means somebody else is pulling the strings. Who is it that appears to be telling Zelensky what to do, what to think, what to say? Who is really running Ukraine? We'll investigate as we continue to unmask Zelensky.
The more you hear and hear, it just gets worse and worse.
Yeah.
It's like there's just more and more sketchy, shady shit going on.
Yeah.
You know, and it just makes Ukraine look even more and more corrupt.
Only if you see that information.
Yeah.
But
I mean, yeah, all right. Like I said, it just shows that there's more to than the narrative that's being pushed.
Russia bad, Ukraine good.
Yeah.
Definitely not in it.
It's definitely not. There's a lot going on the other side as well, man. I'm not saying, like I said, I'm not saying, you know, Putin's innocent completely and everything. Yeah, he's a world leader. You got to understand people in those positions can't be trusted. But
clearly the Ukrainian government and Zelensky are not innocent by any means either.
You know, they're clearly up to dodge shit as well.
Yeah.
It's like, but then they're fooling all us, and so many people have bought into it. You know, it feels like, you know, what happened between 2020 and 2022, and you know, people just full-heartedly believed in it, and guys like you and me were saying like no, and there's so many other people. No. Then it finally comes out the truth, and they're like, oh, okay, yeah, well, whatever happened, just forget it's done now. Let's just move on.
On to the next.
But that's what happened with Iraq as well. Oh, well, it's happened now. Let's move on. You know, okay, so you're going to do the same with this? Oh, it's just happened, you know, all these people just died and, you know, oh, it happened, let's move on.
Yeah.
You know, it's like at some point, you know, grow conscience and take a stand and just admit, okay, I was wrong and maybe I need to be a bit more clued up and do my own research.
That's wishful thinking though, isn't it?
Yeah, that's not going to happen. Is it? People using their own brains, yeah.
Yeah, good luck with that one.
Yeah.
On September 26, 2022, 7 months after Russia invaded Ukraine, 3 massive pipelines exploded under the Baltic Sea. Western media and politicians claimed that the explosions of what were known as the Nord Stream pipelines was sabotage, but not by the US or by Ukraine, but by Vladimir Putin himself. I'm investigative journalist Ben Swan, and this is Zelensky Unmasked. If you don't know what the Nord Stream pipelines are, they form part of what was arguably Russia's biggest economic and political win since the fall of the Soviet Union. They were underwater pipes which carried Russian gas directly to Germany, bypassing third countries. It made it extremely cheap for Europeans and extremely profitable for Russians, which is why the Western media reaction to the destruction of the Nord Stream pipelines as Putin sabotaging his own pipelines was nonsensical. The truth behind what happened, well, that was finally revealed months later by venerable investigative journalist Seymour Hersh, who previously broke stories on the My Lai massacre in Vietnam and the torture of prisoners at Abu Ghraib. In a bombshell report, Hersh detailed how President Biden and the CIA blew up the Nord Stream pipelines, an act of war, not just against Russia, their arch nemesis, but also against their ally, Germany.
The only thing that surprised me about the recent revelation about the Nord Stream pipeline is that it took this long to come out.
The Nord Stream pipelines first began delivering Russian natural gas to Germany in 2011. Before Nord Stream was built, Russian gas was delivered to Western Europe through 2 underground pipes.
Historically, Russia's resources have been essential to Germany, and Germany's technology, its manufacturing capability, its human capital have been very helpful to Russia.
With an underwater pipeline, gas could be delivered directly from Russia to Germany. Bypassing the middle countries, with those transit costs cut, Germany would save big. The original Nord Stream pipeline, Nord Stream 1, greatly increased Russian gas supplies to Europe, especially Germany. Before the pipeline was built, Germany received 37.5% of their natural gas from Russia. Nord Stream nearly doubled that figure, reaching as high as 70% of German gas supplies in 2016. Germany was receiving so much cheap Russian gas that they were able to re-export it to other European countries. Once Nord Stream 1 began operations, Russia began immediately laying the pipes for Nord Stream 2. The second project would increase the gas pipelines from 2 to 4, giving Russian gas supplies to Germany the potential to double. Well, in reaction, U.S. government officials declared Nord Stream 2 a threat.
The Nord Stream 2 pipeline is a pipeline from Russia to Germany to carry natural gas that, if completed, would generate billions of dollars for Putin.
U.S. resistance to Nord Stream 2 began within the first year of the Trump administration. Bipartisan sanction packages effectively brought a halt to the pipeline's construction. The Trump administration wasn't just responding to deep state interests, though, but also to domestic economic concerns. Due to the revolution in fracking in the United States, the U.S. became a natural gas exporter to Europe for the first time in 2016. The United States wanted access to European markets, but their gas was significantly more expensive than that cheap Russian gas. The U.S.'s burgeoning LNG industry received a boon, however, in the form of Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine. Since that time, U.S. exports to Europe have nearly doubled.
But with this action, aren't we, Si, leaving them out in the cold, quite literally?
They're not going to have enough gas to keep their people warm.
But the economic devastation unleashed in Europe because of the switch from Russian to American gas hadn't always been part of the continent's destiny. The year before the Nord Stream explosions, the Biden administration surprised many by introducing a sanctions waiver on the construction of the Nord Stream pipeline. But could they have had another plan in mind? Here's Deputy Secretary of State and Ukraine-Russia policy architect Victoria Nuland.
If Russia invades Ukraine, one way or another, Nord Stream 2 will not move forward.
And here's Biden himself just 2 weeks before Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine.
If Russia invades, then there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2.
Either the president fulfilled his promise and his threat, or he didn't.
But Biden reportedly did come through on his threat. A year after the Russian invasion, Seymour Hersh exposed the inner workings of the top-secret U.S. government mission to destroy the Nord Stream pipelines.
It was an act of war against Russia on the one hand and against Germany on the other.
The Seymour Hersh bombshell report is simply incredible, and it's so incredibly detailed. But in order to understand it, you have to know who this is. Because according to Hersh, 2 months before the Russian invasion, Biden's national security advisor, the guy you see right there, Jake Sullivan, he formed a task force with individuals from the CIA, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Treasury Department, and the State Department. And one of the task force's first duties was to follow through on Biden's approved plan to blow up the Nord Stream pipelines. The CIA reportedly developed a strategy to use people serving in the U.S. Navy's Diving and Salvage Center in Panama City, Florida. See, the divers would plant bombs onto the pipelines, ones that could be detonated remotely. In order to cover their tracks, they planted the bombs during NATO's June 2022 military drills, Baltops 22. The operation to blow up the pipelines was based in Norway, a member of NATO. Norway also happens to be Europe's second leading natural gas supplier behind Russia. The Norwegians recommended that the explosives be placed right off of Denmark's Bornholm Island, whose waters were shallow enough for divers to place the bombs. According to government insiders interviewed by Hersh, the bombs were placed during Baltops 22 and programmed to be detonated at a later date.
I think it rises to a 9/11 scale of attack.
When they aren't blaming Russia for blowing up their own pipelines, mainstream media outlets treated the explosion as a mystery. The White House did too.
So I don't want to get ahead of the investigation.
We have to see who is behind this at this time.
But other public figures reacted to the explosion by gloating, like EU Parliament member Radek Sikorski. He tweeted, then deleted, an image of the Nord Stream blast with a caption that read, quote, "Thank you, USA." Ted Cruz and Victoria Nuland also got in on the fun.
Senator Cruz, like you, I am, and I think the administration is very gratified to know that Nord Stream 2 is now, as you like to say, a hunk of metal at the bottom of the sea.
4 months later, Hirsch released his report, which detailed the U.S. and Norwegian government's planning and execution of this Nord Stream attack. As it stands now, there are no official plans to fix the Nord Stream pipelines. In the meantime, it's U.S. gas producers who are the big winners. Norwegian gas producers have also increased their supplies to Europe. But it's the working class people in Germany and across the rest of Europe who suffer under the weight of rising gas costs and thus higher inflation. Just as U.S. taxpayers suffer from massive amounts of treasure being sent to Ukraine. Next time, we investigate the over $100 billion that the U.S. government has already sent.
So, another example of one, you're trying to obviously cut off income for Russia in a sense. You're trying to control the market, the flow of natural gas to Europe, which you want it to come from America. And the Norwegians obviously, they even said it, were taking in full advantage of that. But again, it's the little person, the average everyday mum and dad, who has to pay the price because of the cost of living. Again, like we've been saying all the way through this, the working class and the poor are the ones that pay the price. For the rich to get profitable, So these big companies, these big corporations want to control that. Oh, bloody Russians! And then they talk to Biden. Biden's like, "Oh, what are you going to do for me? Oh, here you go. Here's a cut. Bang, blow it up." And they've done that, right? But it's also a strategic thing as well. You're trying to cool, you know what I mean? So again, another example of further corruption, I suppose. And like I said, I'm not saying Russia's. I can keep saying it all the way through. I'm not saying Russia's perfect. But we're telling the other side, which the Western media isn't telling you. And I've watched a lot of the Western media side, and you just sit there and go, really? Is that true? Yeah. There's another side to this story, I know it. Especially, I suppose, when this started with the Ukraine and Russia, the first documentary I watched was Ukraine on Fire. And I was like, wow, that blew my head back. And that was just after I did my little research on Minsk 1 and Minsk 2 agreements, the treaties. I was like, and then it was Oliver Stone who did it as well, the documentary. And I was like, wow, okay, that just blew my mind. Like, okay, there's more to, there's another side to this story. It's not all one-sided as the media are making it out to be. But we're going to play a next clip, which is going to be about weapons going to Ukraine. And the question of where are the weapons? Or money that's been sent over for those weapons.
The war in Ukraine has been ongoing for 2 years. In that time, massive amounts of weapons have been sent into the country from the United States and Europe. In fact, the United States alone has dedicated over $100 billion in military aid to Ukraine. It is an incredible figure. But the big question is why? And the answer is not as obvious as you might think. I'm investigative journalist Ben Swan. Take a look at this chart. It shows the military capability of Russia versus Ukraine. The reality, Ukraine is so outmatched they couldn't possibly win, right? Even with the arms that have been dedicated to Ukraine, many of which have not made it to the front lines, Russia has over 3 times the manpower, 13 times as many aircraft, 7 times as many military ships, and 8 times as many tanks. So, even the playing field by giving Ukraine enough weapons to compete? What if all that does is create more death for Ukrainians? This is Zelensky Unmasked.
We're not helping Ukraine win. We're not helping Ukraine survive. We're killing Ukraine.
Ukraine's military is highly overmatched against Russia's, but this fact is conveniently ignored by mainstream media outlets. Before the 2022 invasion, Russia had 900,000 active military personnel. Ukraine had less than 200,000. Russia also has over 15,000 armored fighting vehicles, while Ukraine had just over 3,000. And Russia had 10 times as many military aircraft, 1,391, compared to Ukraine's 132.
An army cannot be built almost from scratch in the middle of a war. And right now, that's what you're talking about doing.
The United States has committed $100 billion of military aid. But there is little known about how the weapons are being supplied.
The interesting thing is when you take a look at how this war is funded, there's different, we put out a dollar amount, but that dollar amount, they're not the same dollars. They do different things. Some of the dollars involve what they call drawdown. So drawdown is if I have 100 tanks and we want to give the Ukrainians 50. We will draw down from the stocks I currently have and give them those 50. But the defense industry will be called upon to either replace or replace with newer stuff.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
U.S. arms companies scored big with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The U.S.'s arms industry shrank by 0.8% in 2021. That's the year before the war. This was the first time the industry experienced a shortfall since 2015, when the arms industry shrank by 0.4%. But this tendency did a 180 with the war. The stock price for the U.S.'s largest defense contractor, Lockheed Martin, jumped up from over $330 on November 1st, 2021 to $480 on February 24th, 2023, 1 year after Russia invaded. In other words, it seems like the company's value shot up over 45% because of this conflict. Raytheon, the defense contractor that current U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin worked for right before taking office, had their stock value rise from $88 to $99 during the same period. That's a jump of 8%.
The military-industrial complex, defense contractors, are making an awful lot of money. Now, some people say, well, that means they're driving the show. No, they aren't. They don't need to, because they are the show.
Many weapons aren't ending up where they're supposed to. In August of 2022, CBS News put out a documentary called Arming Ukraine, in which they reported that only 30% of weapon shipments were getting to where they needed to go. This followed a similar report by CNN, quoting an anonymous U.S. intelligence official who said that the weapons, quote, drop into a big black hole, and you have almost no sense of it at all after a short period of time, end quote. The CBS documentary made waves, enough waves that it was pulled from the air. CBS announced on Twitter that they were updating the documentary to reflect new information given by U.S. officials, and that the film would air at a later date, but that never happened.
I will guarantee you this. There are other parts of the world that the United States wants to traffic weapons to. The Ukraine is also used as a front for that.
We know that there are wars in Africa that are being supplied by weapons that are bled off from these conflicts.
Arms that were supposed to end up in Ukraine have turned up in the hands of terror groups such as ISIS and Boko Haram, according to Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari. Buhari's concerns have been echoed by Finnish authorities, who say that the weapons destined for Ukraine are being trafficked to Finland. Interpol and UK police have expressed similar concerns. Russian officials have also claimed that weapons sent to Ukraine have ended up in the streets of Paris and were used in anti-government protests.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen this movie before. We saw what happened in Libya after the U.S. and NATO overthrew Gaddafi. All of those weapons made a beeline to Syria to arm al-Qaeda and ISIS, who, as you know, Jake Sullivan himself told Hillary Clinton, well, in Syria, al-Qaeda is on our side.
We also have oligarchs in the West, and the oligarchs own the financial system, the media, entertainment, not just in the United States, but in Europe. And they've uniformly signed up for this war.
The wars are unconstitutional, they're illegal, and very expensive, very driven by special interests.
It's all about making money. That's the corruption of it. The military-industrial complex is not in the business of making America safer. They're in the business of making money, and in the process, they're making America weaker.
If that is true, it appears that as America gets weaker as a whole, the country's most powerful people are getting stronger, thanks to the West's arming of Ukraine. Again, it's very difficult for most people worldwide to understand the situation in Ukraine because worldwide, mainstream media outlets are not reporting on the war. They're pushing a narrative about it. But in the country of Ukraine itself, the control on media is unprecedented. In fact, for a country that claims it is defending democracy, Vladimir Zelensky himself has led stunning attacks on journalism and media networks that step out of line. In our next episode, we'll take a look at the political reality on the ground in Ukraine and the shutting down of media that dare to speak out as we continue to leave Zelensky unmasked.
So, more evidence of corruption.
Well, information coming out, isn't
Isn't
it?
it? Like, I mean, you're taking the weapons, the taxpayers' money from the West, you're buying these weapons, and then you're taking those weapons and you're selling them to terrorist organizations. You're selling them to ISIS. You're selling them to... They even said that some of them turned up in Paris, you know, in their riots.
Wow.
You know, like...
What got me there, though, was when one of them mentioned that, okay, if you're going to send, say, tanks, for example, to Ukraine, you have to replenish that stock. You can't have less tanks now. So say if you had 100 tanks, you're going to send 20 to Ukraine. You need to replace that 20 tanks in the US, and that obviously means newer technology. And again, the industrial military complex will supply that and profit. And I never really saw it. I always forget that, yeah, of course, if they're going to fund and send over weapons, then what happened to the weapons in the nation?
Yeah, so now you got to replace that.
Get more in it.
Yeah.
And now the whole world has an even more supply of weapons. Oh, shit.
Like, it's just all dodge, man. Like, it's you know, in like... You're talking about, yeah, we got to fight this big Russian bear, which you've been poking for years and years now, and trying to instigate a war with them, and now there's also corruption coming out, and it just seems like there's multiple revenue streams, illegal revenue streams even going on within Ukraine.
Yeah,
and the rich are getting richer. You know, there's a word like Zelensky's wife. I remember a while ago, she bought a £40,000 while she was in London, handbag or something, and then was saying that, oh, UK needs to give more money to Ukraine.
Give me money.
Give me money, man.
Credit.
Yes,
Shit,
give me money.
man.
Give my little husband money.
What the
Do you know what I mean?
fuck
Like,
is going on in this
give
world,
me a break,
man?
you know what I mean? And you're trying to hold this guy up as some great
wartime
leader,
hero, yeah.
and he's nothing. He's a great puppet.
Yeah, if that.
But okay.
Incidentally, one such organization, Hromadske TV, received generous donations from the Dutch and U.S. embassies, as well as from the Renaissance Foundation, an NGO founded by George Soros.
I set up a foundation in Ukraine before Ukraine became independent of Russia. And the foundation has been functioning ever since. And it played an important part in events now.
We will be back here on this square to celebrate with you a Ukraine that stands with Europe and stands with the United States.
Well, members of Congress were visiting Ukraine during that period, most famously Congressman John McCain. So some of the people who were challenging their government, their elected government at that point, were being told by the senior U.S. official, a person who ran for president and a top official in the U.S. Congress, that the U.S. was with them.
I'm Senator John McCain, and it's always a pleasure to be back in Ukraine.
Senator McCain was, in a sense, giving the people in the Maidan a feeling that they had the backing of the most powerful country on earth.
This is about the future you want for your country. This is about the future you deserve.
Делегаций много проезжало. Я говорил, что нельзя говорить, во-первых, неправду. Нельзя становиться на сторону митингующих и отстаивать их права, создавая тем самым и углубляя конфликт. Когда митингующие захватывают правительственные здания и учреждения, скажите, допустимо ли это в любой другой стране, например, чтобы посол Украины пришел к митингующим в Фергюсоне и раздавал там пряники или пирожки и обвинял полицейских Соединенных Штатов Америки? Я считаю, что это недопустимо ни в одной европейской стране. А почему к Украине было такое отношение?
Who was your highest level contact with the U.S. government in this period?
Я постоянно имел контакт с господином Байденом, вице-президентом. У меня были частые с ним телефонные переговоры. Но дело в том, что господин Байден говорил одно, а в Украине делали другое.
And the U.S. ambassador?
Посол Соединенных Штатов в Украине постоянно принимал представителей Майдана у себя в посольстве. Мы это очень хорошо знали, мы это отслеживали. И создавалось такое впечатление, что в посольстве Соединенных Штатов существует штаб, который управляет этим процессом.
In early February of 2014, as the Maidan crisis was getting more violent, there was a phone call that was intercepted. It was a call between the Assistant Secretary of State for European Affairs, Victoria Nuland, and the U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, Geoffrey Pyatt.
Questions of credibility are being raised after a private chat between two top U.S. diplomats was leaked online.
I think Yats is the guy who's got the economic experience, the governing experience. He's the guy, you know, what he needs is Klitsch and Tony Book on the outside. I just think Klitsch going in, he's going to be at that level working for Yatsenyuk. It's just not going to work.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Okay. Good. Well, do you want us to try to set up a call with him as the next step?
Sullivan's come back to me, VFR, saying you need Biden, and I said probably tomorrow for an attaboy and to get the deets to stick. So
Okay.
Biden's willing.
So you had this remarkable phone call where you have these two senior officials of the U.S. government apparently talking about a coup or how they were planning to restructure the government of Ukraine.
Fuck the EU.
No, exactly.
I'm not saying the whole U.S. government feels that way. There is division on this, but the neoconservative element wants very much to change the strategic dynamic in Eastern Europe. The neocons are very smart people, and they've been at this for a long time. They came in around the issue of propaganda. They studied how to create hot buttons for the American people. They had this experience when they were getting the American people to get excited about Central America back in the 1980s.
Sandinista regular army. The ground force is being equipped now with Russian artillery.
And they've been applying those same strategies ever since. They remain very dedicated to achieving their goals. They still want to get rid of certain governments. They wanted regime change in Syria, for instance, regime change in Iran. They're very skilled at this, and they have a lot of allies now inside the news media, inside the government, and that means that they can do a lot to control the narrative of any story.
I think in America these days, we have somehow told ourselves that there are a lot of ways of dealing with these problems other than hard power. Vladimir Putin cares about hard power.
The neoconservatives can now demonize a leader of a country. That sells with the American people. So you don't just sort of argue a policy, you attack the leader. So the neoconservatives became very skilled at picking out leaders, finding their ugly traits, and then highlighting them. Yanukovych, he might say was a rather clunky political leader, but you make him into a devil. He's totally corrupt and he's evil and he wants to kill people in the Maidan, these wonderful white-hatted demonstrators. So you've got a black hat versus white hat. And you keep repeating that basic scenario. And it works with the American people.
You've got to realize what Vladimir Putin is. He's an old KGB colonel that wants to restore the Russian Empire.
You make them into demons, and the American people find that the way they can understand the world. Once that happens, it's very difficult for a journalist or anyone else to say, you know, hold it, that guy, he's got more of a gray hat than a white hat or a black hat. And if you say that, you're a Yanukovych apologist or you're a Putin apologist, and then the attacks come on to the person saying it, the journalist, the academic, or whoever.
So that clip was taken from Ukraine on Fire, just to kind of give you an idea of like the coup that the US instigated, planned, and executed when a democratically elected leader in Ukraine was placed into power by the people of Ukraine back in 2014 or whenever it was. But again, it just shows how much involvement the US have now had in Ukraine, where it's all stemming from. Let's not forget, Vladimir Putin, going back as far as Bill Clinton, asked Bill Clinton when he was in power and he was the US president, that's a long time ago, Russia, we want to get closer to the rest of the world. Can we join NATO? Okay. And Clinton said, I'm not sure, let me find out for you. And Clinton then came back and said, no, you can't join NATO. So why is that the case? Why wouldn't you let Russia join NATO?
We need you to be the enemy.
Yeah, because you need to be the enemy. And not only do you need to be the enemy, we want your resource, mate. We want to control it because you know you're the sort of person who won't allow us to control it.
No chance.
We can't control you as a leader.
Yeah.
So you can't join us. And that's a fact. That what I've just given you there. So, you know, more dodge there as well.
Yeah, the US always got their hand in it.
But I want to get onto this next bit, which is really interesting. It's about this Azos battalion. You heard of them?
No, what's that?
All right, but I'm going to put a pic up first,
okay,
and then we're going to talk about it. And here is the Azos, or whatever you want to call them, battalion. And basically, they are a far-right neo-Nazi group in the Ukraine, and they are now part of the Ukrainian military, and they have their own battalion.
Within the Ukrainian military, like official. They're not like some rebel group. They're officially military.
And Zelensky can't kick him out or anything like that because if he did, they would turn around and take him out.
How big is this group?
Huge.
Fuck.
Like they're kids, like from birth, they raise them to be this way. And if you go and watch Ukraine on Fire, Ukraine on Fire gives you the background and the link with Ukraine and Nazis back in World War II, because Ukraine was on Germany's side.
And so what's their motive?
The connection. They're just racists.
Racist.
So what do you know about Nazis? What is a Nazi? That's what they are.
That's true.
All right. And the guy that funded and backed Zelensky from the beginning and still does now, the oligarch, the guy at the beginning, I forget his name, he's Jewish. And from what I understand, Zelensky's Jewish as well.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
So help this make sense. And now, not only that, we've got all these Brits and all these people and the US and all these people who are so proud about World War II and Winston Churchill. My granddad did this, my granddad did that, and shout out to them and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, you do realise who you're supporting here. Yeah, you're supporting the very group of sort of people that your granddad and your grandparents fought against.
Yep.
I mean, or your father fought against, or your uncle fought against. Yeah. So just bear that in mind when you're showing so much support towards Ukraine, because
they have
they have their own Nazi battalion within their military.
That's crazy, and Zelensky knows about it. And
yeah, of course he does.
Or they're
part of the military. Of course he knows about them.
Well, that's not good, then, is it? You know, it's ironic. It's not actually that wild of a thought. I remember back in doing geography back at school, one of the lessons we did was about Ukraine and how racism was like really strong there, and
but
in their football games they'll throw bananas at the black players and stuff like that. So you know, racism has always been big in Ukraine. But to see that they have their own division,
the ones that came over here, right? So I think it was Channel 4 where it was. They did an interview with someone. You remember they were saying, "Oh, let a Ukrainian live with you." You remember they'll pay you.
Oh
you can have a Ukrainian family live in your house, and the government will give you money and all that.
Yeah.
So some people went for it, right? And there was one woman who said, "I said the Ukrainian woman that was living with her, she was white. The woman she was living with was white." White Brit, and she turned around and said that when she was talking to the news broadcaster or whatever, the interviewer, and she said, so like the Ukrainian family that you had, the mother of the family, like what was her thoughts on London? And she goes, well, she goes, I'm going to try and put this in the most politest way I could. She goes, she was uncomfortable in London because she didn't like that there were so many black and brown faces around.
Shit. Yeah,
it's so ethnically diverse. She didn't like that. It made her feel comfortable because when you go to Ukraine, it's all white, right?
Can imagine. Yeah.
There's not a lot of black. They are black and Indian straight because remember when they were trying to get them out of the country, everyone was trying to get out of the country when it started. They were throwing the black and Indian students off the trains trying to get out of the country.
Oh yeah,
do you remember that?
I do remember that.
They were throwing them off the trains.
What the fuck was that about?
Yeah, so.
Oh man,
where people that everyone forgets that bit.
Yeah,
it's how everyone conveniently forgets all these things. Yeah,
that's true.
So it is a country. To be fair, I'm saying all of them. Yeah, but there is a lot of people in that country who hold racial biases and prejudices, and they clearly got a battalion, a right wing group, a neo-Nazi group who are now part of their military. So imagine if you got drafted and you go fight there, like you and me, who are of an ethnic minority.
I go
there and then I'll go, yeah, you through? You want me to fight with these guys? I'm happy to fight. I'm probably going to fight these guys rather than go over there and fight the Russians.
Well, they already said that in Donbass. They are doing friendly fire and the Ukrainians are killing their own citizens. So fuck that.
But I'm going to finish on this bit before we go into our final thoughts.
Okay.
I'm going to play a clip from Tommy Robinson. I don't really agree with everything Tommy Robinson. I feel like the stuff I dug up about him already exposed him for what he truly is.
Yeah.
But we're going to play. But on this point, when he gets asked this question about Ukraine, I think he's pretty much hit the button. If that makes sense, yeah.
What are your views on the war in Ukraine currently?
I believe the war in Ukraine has been instigated by expansionist ideas of the European Union. I believe it's globalism. I believe they've prodded and prodded and prodded since 2014, when there was the overthrowing of a democratically elected government in Ukraine and replaced with a puppet who is Zelensky. And that puppet went on an offensive, and neo-Nazi gangs went on an offensive, attacking the minority, which was the Russians. And they were, 60 of them set on fire in one day. No one ever faced prosecution. Yeah, there was lots of crimes, the banning of speaking Russian in all the schools. And right now, racism against Russians is encouraged. It's insane. Yeah, it's insane. I'd look at what you've done to Roman Abramovich and Chelsea Football Club. I just think, so what? Because he owned a company that sold some steel to make weapons for Russia. You've now took everything off him, yeah? But you deal with Saudi Arabia, who have been bombing kids in Yemen for the last 10 years. They've been blowing up schools every week, or they're murdering. Yeah? You fund all the missiles there. You give them all the weapons. So the hypocrisy in it, and the agenda of it, and the breakdown of it. So there were certain areas that felt like they were liberated when the Russians come in. Yeah? Don't get me wrong, I think what's happening to innocent Ukrainians in the middle of this plan, and since 2014 they've done this, and it's all orchestrated, and I believe it's gone against all the agreements they previously had with Russia. And I believe that expansionist ideas is the European Union, it's our government's disgusting foreign policies, and right now there's lots of innocent Ukrainians in the middle of that. That doesn't mean Putin's a nice guy, doesn't mean their agenda isn't disgusting as well, but it's been instigated because Ukraine used to borrow off of Putin. They used to get all their resources off of Putin. They used to deal with Putin. There's a lot of rich resources in that country of Ukraine, and the globalist agenda wants it. They want rid of Putin as well. Yeah? Just like they got rid of Saddam Hussein, just like they got rid of Gaddafi, just like they tried to get rid of Assad. Why couldn't you get rid of Assad? Probably because of his connections as well with Russia. Yeah? But you wanted rid of Assad. What are you replacing him with? Look what you've done with Libya. It's disgusting, man. And that is foreign policy. That is the British. As I've come to grow, I've just come to be disgusted with much of our history, of what our governments have done, what the elitist globalist agenda is. They talk about democracy. They keep going about protecting democracy in Ukraine. Just research it. Research what's gone on in Ukraine and research who's behind it. George Soros again. Billionaires, the people who are sitting in the WEF meetings now, planning our next future of our lives, where they're going to globalise and digitalise all of us as slaves, basically. So I think, do you know what? When I look at that, my views have shifted a lot. My views have been against Islam, and this is the biggest threat. I believe we're all being used. They've played us against each other, even down to the immigration they're bringing in. They want us all broken into little sections. They want us into you're gay, you're straight, you're black, you're white, all broken, yeah? Because if we were united against them, yeah, and what they're doing, because they're taking all of our freedoms, what they are doing now, and what they're planning now, and we won't say the word because you might get a strike on this, begins with C, yeah, ends in D, we know what we're talking about, but all of this, yeah, is part of their agenda, and Ukraine's part of that. And I feel sorry for the Ukrainians who are stuck in the middle.
Tommy.
Just want to throw in a side note, this interview was done before recent events in the UK. And we've heard what Tommy just said there. And now Tommy has come out very vocally contradicting himself a little bit regarding his war, his battle with Islam and stuff like that, as we well know. But most of everything else he said there, I thought he was pretty bang on, hit the nail on the head.
Kind of summarized it perfectly, to be honest. Everything that we've just showed about with like all the truth in media footage and, you know, the Ukraine on fire and the whole discussion that we've just had, Tommy's kind of summed it up. Ultimately as well, it's the innocent that are suffering, and it's disgusting what's going on.
But look, the last question we're going to have to do is the one that scares the shit out of you, I know that.
Wow.
Is there going to be a World War III?
Is there going to be a World War III? First we need to break down what we mean by World War III. Do I think that there's going to be a war where the whole world is involved? Possibly. But do I believe that?
But that's not what World War is.
What's World War? Because I will talk about war on the streets.
For it to be a class as a world war, only the superpowers, current superpowers, have to be involved in war, and that is a world war because they are the superpowers.
But where does the fighting take place? Are we saying that the bomb is going to come down
multiple fronts? So look at World War II. World War II didn't just take place in Europe. It took place in the Pacific. against Japanese.
Yeah.
It took place in North Africa against the Nazi Germans. It took place in multiple places. It took place in Russia.
I think World War III.
Australia, nothing happened in Australia, but the Australians were involved. They played their part and fought.
I think World War III will happen. I just don't know how close it will come to home, if that makes sense.
So just make it really clear to everyone out there, for there to be a World War III, or for there to be a world war, only the superpowers of the current superpowers on the planet need to be engaged in war. Whether on what side, doesn't matter what sides they're on, they just have to be engaged. What? So it could be two different battles. Yeah, so I'll make up a scenario.
Philippines and China is going to go off, and the US.
I'll make up like China, North Korea and South Korea don't like each other. They're at war with each other. No one else is getting involved. They're just at war with each other. Russia, Ukraine, Israel, and Iran. Yeah, no one else is getting involved. They're just at war with each other. Yeah, and let's say all of those were superpowers. World War III's on. It's going on. And it might just happen in those regions, but it's happening.
Okay.
Yeah, the superpowers, if you Google it, it just says superpowers, current superpowers must be involved and engaged in war. That's World War III.
But by that definition, yeah, World War III is already brewing, isn't it?
Well, it's pretty much there. You've got Ukraine, Russia, you've got US and the Brits are involved, France are involved.
China's already been
Germany's
hostile
involved.
to people.
I think they're the current superpower. I think Brazil's current superpower potential, or a future, I'm not sure. There's multiple still, like China still got involved, but that could happen with Taiwan.
Yeah, as I said, look, China and Philippines are kicking off, and America's obviously backing the Philippines, and that could turn into a whole thing. South China Sea, that area, that region. Obviously, you mentioned Israel with Iran.
Right now,
all surrounding countries.
The biggest hotbeds are obviously right now Ukraine and Russia, which is ongoing. We know it's going on, but the biggest kickoff is definitely the Middle East. Israel with literally the whole region.
But that's what I mean. Do I see a World War III coming to our streets, like Baker Street?
It doesn't work like that, man.
London.
What's wrong with you?
So I don't think that's going to happen.
World War II, that never happened.
Yes, it did.
No, only bombs fell.
Yeah, bombs fell. I don't think bombs are going to...
Germans never invaded.
Do you think bombs are going to fall on London?
Might do. If you piss off Putin enough, he might say, "Oh, you ain't listening, cool."
Shit.
Bam. Yeah, I had one of those.
I don't know, man. I don't see that happening.
You don't know that.
I think that's too much collateral. But I don't know that. Yeah, you're right. I have no idea how it's going to play out.
Germans never placed a foot on British soil, so far as I'm aware. And they might have taken some of the Channel Island areas, and that I know they probably took some of that territory, but I don't think they ever stepped foot on British soil. It was just bombing raids. The conflict took place on mainland Europe.
Do you expect... So what's your take then? Do you think that we'll get bombed? I don't
know if we'll get bombed, but I'm saying we'll be involved.
I think we've already proven that we're involved.
Iraq War, were we there? We were there.
Yeah.
Afghanistan, were we there? We were there. We're the lapdogs of the US.
Yeah.
We say no to them, oh, fine, sod you ain't get no help from us if Putin bangs you back then. Bye-bye.
No, I mean, look, they
need, and you've got to remember, 70,000 troops. If they don't do a draft, we've only got less than 70,000 troops, or somewhere around 75,000.
See, this is where I don't think we're going to get drafted.
So that means we're going to need the US then. So if the US said jump, we're going to jump. Our question, we're going to reply and say, how high would you like us, Mr. US?
Shit.
Mr. Uncle Sam, how high do you want us to jump?
Yeah.
Because we're like, there's a video I watched today, even our weaponry, we're at problems. We are seriously vulnerable as a nation. If Putin wanted to invade and take over the UK tomorrow, he could do it.
I don't think he could.
No, he could.
How?
How could he not?
Because logistically, to send... How far is Russia? A few thousand miles?
And?
How long would it take to send tanks? We would catch that.
You telling me he doesn't have the resource to do that?
How long would it take, do you think?
That's not how long it takes.
Well, you just said
but
in a day.
It would be the same with US and China and Taiwan. They would have to cross the Pacific to come and support Taiwan.
And we would spot that on
and they would still, but you can't stop it. You still can do it.
But in the process of
how do they get to, like, come on, that's like crossing the Mediterranean as well, like to go fight North America in World War II. You're making it like it's impossible to do.
But back then the technology wasn't there where you could spot.
You could still do it though. They've got submarines all over the way. You've got submarines you can't see. that can't be detected. There's
Well,
a
how's
woman
the submarine
on
gonna get
Ryan Shaw show. She says you can't detect them.
So what? They're going to send a submarine round through the channel? Or
How do you know
how
that?
would it get to the UK?
From the north of Russia,
Yeah.
Arctic,
Yeah.
down to UK.
And they'll do that undetected.
They could do it, but the thing is, who's going to stop them? Norway, bang. Finland, bang.
But why? As soon as the bang goes off,
And don't forget,
then that's a wake-up call for all the other
you're
nations.
forgetting the Russian territory in Europe. There's a territory in Europe where Lithuania is called what's it called? Kaliningrad? I can't remember. I can't pronounce it. Which they've kept from the Soviet days, and they're completely militarized. And guess what's right over here? UK.
I don't know. Maybe my head's in the
So
sand,
I can't show you because guys on the screen can't see. Guys at home can't see it. But you got where Lithuania is.
Yeah.
There's a little Russian territory. Yeah, and right there is the UK, and it's completely militarized with nukes.
Shit.
Completely protected. Told you, strategy. Why does the UK hold on to certain British territories from the old empire? Because strategically they can have bases in those places.
Yep.
Same with the US, they do that as well. Strategically play bases in their allies' backyard. Because, we're close to Russia then if we go to war. We're close to China if we go to war. Russia does the same thing.
Yeah.
So if you go to war tomorrow, they're in position already.
But like you just said, though, we're also in position, are we not? We're also in position. The US is in position.
Yeah, but so are they. So to turn around to debunk your theory of, how are you going to get there? They're in position.
They're in position, but
Belarus as well.
Oh, man, I don't know.
Stop it, mate. You need to learn how to
what's the time frame on
listen. Treble shit his pants, yeah, but I don't think Treble's
we're going to get drafted.
I'm not going to say Treble's got a new job coming up, which will be exempt him from any drafts. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say. Yeah, right? But he's shitting his pants because he's a young buck. Yeah, he's 24. Yeah.
25 now, and again.
25. There you go.
Yeah,
25, right? Okay. Whereas I'm like 42 now, so I'm getting a bit older. I might get away with it. He might not. Yeah. But yeah, I think like there's a possibility. I don't know whether he would. It depends. Like he's quite tolerant as well. I feel like he's been quite patient and tolerant, but that also worries me as well. Like because he's warned the UK and US multiple times.
Don't get involved in it.
Now he's warning Israel like get out of Lebanon. Like you don't belong there. Back off. And apparently even the Israeli Prime Minister rang Putin to tell Iran don't attack us in the recent attack that took place, and he declined to take the call. He's like, no, we can deal with it. You took out one of their leaders, their generals or whatever it was, one of their political leaders. You're going to get a retaliation for it now.
Standing on business.
Yeah, he's also turning around and saying, get out of Lebanon while you're at it. And the Israelis were stupid enough to bomb in Syria, and I don't think they actually bombed the Russian base, but it was close to the Russian base. One of the missiles landed, and they're like, you're getting close.
I don't know. I think civil war is definitely going to happen as well.
So what? Civil war can happen as well?
Yeah, civil war and a World War III.
Yeah.
In what, the next couple of years?
Why can't it happen?
No, I think the evidence is supporting it at the moment, isn't it? Scary times.
I think it can happen and we can be attacked. Remember, like I said, they've got Russian territory in Europe. I just can't pronounce the name, I can't remember it. I was watching it the other day and it's right there, poised. And it's strategically perfect for the UK. And it's got nukes there. They've got nukes in place there. It's completely militarized. Yeah, because that's their in if they need to go after Europe. And then they've got their boys Belarus as well, who's pretty much an extension of Russia. They're clicked up. Then you got, think about it as well, Turkey are looking to join BRICS as well.
Yeah.
BRICS nations, which is made up of Russia, Brazil, China, I think, India, South Africa, and Iran's in there now as well. I think Saudi Arabia's joined it now. Venezuela's joined it now, I think. These are your allies. Hey, Venezuela, yes, we're going to come bring some nukes your way.
Fuck.
Where was it? There was a video of it on was it in Cuba? Yeah, I think it was in Cuba. Or was it Venezuela? I think it was Cuba. And the Russian ships turned up, military ships. He's already positioning people. And you can't stop them. You can't say to Russia, it's international waters. They can go into it if they want. What are you doing? We're taking our ships to Cuba.
Well, this is the thing. Is Russia and China going to team up as well? Because there was a photo of Russian and Chinese fighter jets and drones flying together, like near Alaska area.
Yeah.
And they're like, what's that about?
Apparently the Chinese were flying pretty close to Japan recently in the last couple of days, and I think Japan shot one of them out of the sky.
Shit, man. What does this mean?
You're in our airspace.
So what does this mean for the everyday man kind of thing? Like, is it just going to be lockdowns and just sitting home watching Netflix
we're gonna do an episode on Albert Pike soon, mate. Yeah,
Okay.
And that man made some predictions.
It's all written
Not
down,
even
isn't
predictions. People think they were predictions. No. He was telling you in the 1800s what's to come.
Yeah.
And it's played out exactly like that.
Well, this is the thing where we're talking about these families and these banks and these companies, having 100 years ago. But actually, it goes long before that.
So far, I've not been wrong with everything, man. I had a mate who told me he thought I was a nut job for years, and recently just sat down and goes, "Yeah, I was watching this with my brother-in-law. And I thought, a cipher told me that 5 years ago. Diddler told me that 5 years ago. This and that told me that 5 years ago. He told me this. Cypher said that. Oh yeah, I remember you said that. I remember you said this. I remember you said that.
But this is why I don't like you saying World War III is going to happen then, isn't it?
I get it. But like you can't stick your head in the sand. It's a high possibility it's going to happen.
Yeah, the evidence is.
And they're all pushing for it.
They want it, don't they?
Look at Starmer. Starmer's itching for it. The US currently, who are there right now, even like I know everyone holds Trump up like, oh, he never had any wars under. Yeah, but he never stopped any wars either. He continued those wars.
Did he not bring some boots back?
He didn't have to start any wars because they were already started.
Yeah.
Now these wars are currently going on. Do you honestly think? Like, I'm not convinced he would go to Putin and say, right, you need to stop what you're doing with. Putin's going to say, fuck off. Who you think you're talking to, mate?
Well, one can hope, though.
You're not the only G. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You go to China and like, what? What do you want? Yeah, cool, we'll stop. You back off, go back home, take your ships with you. We're going to take Taiwan back.
Oh, it's all going to kick off.
It's going to kick off.
It's actually coming close, though, isn't it? As you said, with the elections coming up. Yeah. That'll probably be the turning point. So we're looking at early 2025?
Look, man, I just think it's going to get mad out of control. Like, Israel and Iran don't look like they're letting up. Hezbollah doesn't look like it's letting up. The Houthis in Yemen just took, I saw, it might have been an old footage. I think it might have been old footage, or it might have been recent, but they took out a British oil tanker.
Did they?
Yeah.
Recently? Or?
I remember that area.
Yeah.
Right? There's a lot of trade routes and stuff like that going through there. If that gets locked up in war, there's a lot of stuff we're going to be going without for going forward. And mention oil prices. So we might not get hit, like we might not be physically hit or involved here.
To be like
but economically it will affect us massively here.
And they've already got their psychological warfare ongoing as well, destabilizing our minds.
Yeah.
Then they're going to hit us economically. That's already damage enough.
It's just going to get messy, and people, and that's the thing, like people are like, I get it, people are caught up in their own lives and stuff, especially, and people are like, yeah, whatever, yeah, and until it hits you, it's like, but you, at some point, you might want to start thinking, like, how do I prepare for this?
And what is the way to prepare for this?
Oh dear, man, I don't know. Do you keep cash in the house? You keep a tin of cash?
If the value's gone down,
because remember, it's not just going to be like you said, like we talked about WhatsApp. You're right. There's going to be elements of it where it's going to be cyber attacks. You know, cyber, we've already seen that. Even Bill Gates said it. He said that future wars will be like things like cyber attacks and drones and stuff like that. We're going to see elements of that as well. But you still need troops, because in order to take someone's land, you need troops to invade and govern it and police it, right? So you still need all of that. And the opposite side's going to say no, fight back, and you're going to have a war in a sense. They're using drones right now in Ukraine. And I've seen the clip, the Russian guys, like the Russian soldiers like hiding, and then he doesn't spot because they're under trees, and he finds another unit and blows them up.
Well, this is what I mean about World War III. I think it'll be more like drones and stuff like that.
But there's going to be elements of that as well. But there's going to be ground troops as well.
And so what do
you can't just put it on. It's like when they did Iraq, right? They did like 2 weeks worth of bombardment of missiles and blah, blah, blah. But in the end, they still have to put boots on the ground.
But again, though, Iraq was how many years ago now? I think the technology is advanced. I think we need less troops.
But you can't have them govern it. You can't send drones in, right? Drones govern these people.
But maybe they don't want to govern us. Maybe they just want total chaos.
So they don't want Russians, oil, and blah, blah, blah.
But what about what's going to happen in the UK, for example?
We just spent 2 hours discussing it, man.
But
troubleshooting is bad. That's what
a lot of shit, man.
Treble, when we talk about this topic, conscription and drafts and stuff like that, Treble turns into a sheep. An ostrich just sticks his head in the sand and just says, no,
not going to happen.
It's like what happened in 2020 and 2022. No, it's not true. But yeah, stop it, man. Listen, I think we had a long enough session. I'm tired. Yeah, so we're going to leave it at that.
Yeah.
All right.
There's a lot of content in that.
Like, share, subscribe, all that stuff. Leave comments. We're happily do another video on this if you want to. There's so much content on Truth and Media I still haven't watched. But of course, if there's something you want us to discuss, leave a link to a video or whatever, and we're happy to do an episode on it. Follow us on TikTok. Starting to grow a little bit on TikTok.
Yeah.
Instagram and Twitter, not so much, but TikTok seems to be best. So follow us over there as well. We do put. I try and put stuff up daily. But yeah, the big one is follow us here on YouTube. Follow us on Spotify. Follow us on Rumble. Those are the platforms that we're on at the moment. And we're just here to talk truth, man. But obviously, YouTube and a lot of places are not going to give us.
Nah, we're getting Matrix attacked
so if
hard.
you do jump on here and even if it's just one view of someone and you like what you're hearing, share it with your friends and family, because that's the only way we're going to growth. We're going to show growth. Yeah. But until next time, I'm Cypher.
I'm Treble.
And we out.
Peace.